In this public hearing of the Select Committee on Nuclear Energy for the inquiry into nuclear power generation in Australia. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners on the land in which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past and present, and also acknowledge any cultures of any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islanders people with us today. This hearing will be broadcast on Parliament's website, and the proof and official transcript of the proceedings will be published on the committee's webpage. I'd like to emphasise that the public gallery is open today at the discretion of the committee, which expects proceedings to remain orderly and peaceful throughout, please. So if we can just have respect to the witnesses that are coming up today. I now welcome Anthony Lonergan, Trevor Woolley and Mudgee District Environment Group to give evidence today. This is the closest we've ever been, so it's quite nice. We don't need the speakers today. For the Hansard record, would you please state your name and capacity in which you appear before the committee, and we'll start with you, Anthony.
My name is Tony Lonergan, and I'm here as a representative of the Denman, Aberdeen, Muswellbrook, Scone Healthy Environment Group.
Yeah, Trevor Woolley, here as myself and for myself.
Excellent.
I'm Rosemary Hadaway. I'm here as Chair of Mudgee District Environment Group.
Thank you. This hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament that giving a false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Before I invite you to all make a brief opening statement, then we proceed to discussions. Would you please state if you're a current or former member of a political party or a union or an investor in the renewables or nuclear industries, please? We'll start with you.
I'm a member of the New South Wales Greens, and I have been a candidate in elections.
I'm a former member of the Engineers Association, Professionals Australia morphed into.
Yep.
I'm a current member of the Sustainable Australia Party.
Excellent. Thank you. I now invite you to all make a brief opening statement before we proceed to questions, and we'll start with you.
Look, my statement will take about 3.5 to 4 minutes. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's okay, yeah.
Okay. DAMSAG is a community organisation dedicated to providing a voice to industry and all levels of government in defence of our natural environment, in the interests of human health and well-being and the protection of biodiversity. We've been operating for about 10 years. We see a number of issues. One impact of the decision to proceed with nuclear power station here in the Upper Hunter will be on the availability of services. It's already difficult to attract professionals such as GPs to the area. A low but a non-zero chance of a radiation leak or more serious accidents will certainly deter some people from moving to Muswellbrook. I personally know 2 music teachers who are dedicated to the local community who will certainly up stakes and leave. This will be an ongoing issue, no matter the perceived safety of nuclear reactors by others in the community. The proposal that radioactive waste be stored on site for the life of the reactor or reactors is totally unacceptable. The world seems set to be a less predictable place in upcoming decades, with conflict and acts of terrorism not out of the question. Construction of a permanent nuclear waste repository must be committed to before any construction of a reactor begins. Finland has set a standard, and the people of the Hunter are entitled to the same standard. The cost must be paid by the generation that uses the electricity, not by their grandchildren, and likewise with the decommissioning costs. I realise the availability of water is going to be looked at during this inquiry, but I'd like to remind the committee that during the Millennium Drought, Glenmorn Dam was perilously close to being empty. The closure of Liddell and the looming closure of Bayswater will release valuable water resources to agriculture and other industries and communities in both normal and the extreme climatic conditions we're likely to see in the future as global warming intensifies. A nuclear reactor will inevitably negate this opportunity for longer-term water security in the Hunter. Another major impact, as we see it, is on the economic opportunities available to the future. We know the coal industry will end sooner or later, and we need a transition plan for this community. We don't want to be Broken Hill, where population halved as mining declined. Over the years, I've attended a number of head-scratching and butcher paper scribbling sessions about how we might fare in a decarbonised world and how we might thrive. There's been some excellent work done by community groups like Hunter Jobs Alliance and Hunter Renewal, by local governments. AGL, Twiggy Forest and others have been heard in this space as well. State and federal governments have had occasional input. This proposal seems to us to be ill thought out, obviously incredibly expensive, and threatens to divert attention from the important work needed to develop a pathway to a sustainable future for communities in the Upper Hunter that have contributed so much to the prosperity of the nation and in fact have already paid a significant environmental price for doing so. You'll have noticed the surrounding terrain of the town of Muswellbrook, no doubt, on your way here. So thank you, and thanks for the opportunity of speaking.
Thank you, Tony. Mr. Lee.
Yeah, welcome, and thanks for this opportunity. Undoubtedly, you've already heard about timeframes and for building and need for flexibility. Baseload no longer exists. So I'm not going to touch them. What I would like to highlight is something that is very seldom discussed, and certainly what I haven't heard, is the reserve capacity in the network. At the moment, there would be reserve capacity in the network somewhere to compensate for the loss of the biggest unit. The biggest unit's somewhere between 700 and 750 megawatts at the moment. If we increase that to the proposed 1,100 megawatts, that's going to be an incredible reserve capacity we have to have 24 hours a day. Not only that, because of the limits of the interconnectors, we're probably going to have reserve capacity in New South Wales and Queensland and Victoria. The network then becomes incredibly inefficient, and there's a huge cost to that, and it's hidden. It's hidden by the network, but it has to be allowed for. We have a relatively small network. Big machines don't necessarily fit very well or very efficiently. In my submission, I've talked about local jobs. The average job in a coal-fired plant is all about materials handling. It's about ash, dust, coal, milling. Those don't exist anymore. And a lot of people, I don't think, really add up the number of jobs that aren't going to be there in a nuke. There are different types of jobs, but a lot of the jobs aren't going to exist. The thing that really gets to me, though, is the division of our community. There's so much fear, anger, false facts. It's driven by a very poor planning system, and it's driven by people. There is an opportunity to get wealth into regional communities, to safeguard them against drought and financial stress. It's being poorly handled. It's causing divisions in their community, and it's not giving wealth to every person in the community. There's an opportunity to change all of that and bring wealth to all people in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hattaway.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm the chair of Mudgee District Environment Group, as I mentioned, and our submission was a composite effort of many, so I am not a subject expert on the specific points within that. So today I would like to just reiterate our main objections to the idea of initiating any nuclear energy generation in Australia. We believe that the federal and state legal prohibitions against construction of power reactors have served Australia well and should be retained. Nuclear is the least appropriate form of energy for Australia's future, and we support the expansion of renewable energy generation and storage that is rapidly taking the lead role in our energy mix. We urge regulatory and financial incentives to utilise the existing rooftop solar. How often do we hear on the news of Australia being a lead in that? Our community and our households are ready. So what do we need? We need some incentives, some regulatory mechanisms to assist. Rooftop solar, microgrids, community power, they are all there waiting for us to implement as viable and valuable contributions to reduce demand on the energy grid and even out that demand situation that we're constantly told about via the headlines. Of course, pumped hydro would have a capacity to even out that demand as well. So I include that in the renewable components. But of course it's very difficult. As the previous speakers have suggested, there's a lot of community angst, a lot of community division. So the MDEG, Mudgee District Environment Group, recommend to the inquiry that to cut through some of that, there should be respect for and acceptance of legitimate science and verifiable factual reporting. Respect for and acceptance of expert, unbiased analysis. If we take that current misinformation and disinformation that seems to be circulating with the horror headlines, we run a huge risk of going along emotionally with that. But there are mechanisms to help us manage that risk. Internationally and nationally, there is an expectation that we adhere to ecologically sustainable development principles, that we acknowledge and incorporate the precautionary principle. If we don't know the full result of something, we don't do it. We operate to the best of our existing knowledge, yes, but we accept that there are limitations. We also are very aware within these guiding principles, internationally accepted, that there needs to be intergenerational equity. The present generation should ensure that the health, diversity and productivity of the environment are maintained or enhanced. What right have we got to leave anything less for future generations? If we consider those principles, the main difficulties with the nuclear energy generation would be waste management, transport and storage. We know that scientifically. Nuclear waste is a problem that no country in the world has yet resolved. No country has a secure long-term facility. At present, waste is generally stored on site. There's a decommissioned nuclear power plant at Sellafield in the UK. It holds thousands of tonnes of radioactive waste, including 140 tonnes of plutonium. The Russians use very small amounts, I understand, personally. The half-life of this plutonium is 24,000 years. Nuclear waste of this sort will need to be stored safely for hundreds of thousands of years. So how can we possibly say we are acting ethically, we are acting sustainably, if we create such waste by going into a nuclear generation future? It is unethical, inequitable and totally reprehensible, I would think, for my generation to do that for thousands of generations into the future. At Plymouth Harbour in the UK, I was on a ferry trip and the commentator said, yes, those submarines over there are in mothballs, not operational. They were nuclear-powered subs. They're beyond their operational life, but they're still sitting there because no one knows what to do with the reactors. It's ludicrous. It is unethical to burden future generations of Australians and of the world. This problem of the waste and storage and transport, I would include in that, it becomes an invisible and unspoken cost. It's way too complex and way too long a time frame for us to attempt to cost that. What is the truth then is that the gen cost estimates that the CSIRO publishes, they cannot and do not attempt to cost that sort of long-term aspect of this industry. Sorry, I'm not sure how my time's going. If I could suggest then, back to one of our main points, if I leave the nuclear waste for a moment and come back to our support for renewables, in the last 10 years, since I have lived off-grid personally, the developments within the renewable components have been amazing. The panels, the capacity, the physical size, and likewise for the turbines. There is increasing technology developments, improvements in how we manage and have that energy available. In 10 years, it has changed dramatically. So has battery technology. We don't expect that to suddenly stop and turn off, and no, this will be what we have in another 10 years. Recycling of the components of the panels and the turbines are potential growth industries in our regions where the renewable energy zones are being located. Support for renewables, it's very obvious. Just the same as I would conclude by saying Australia should not be pursuing nuclear power. It's clearly the most expensive way in all senses of that word. Expensive financially, environmentally, socially and community. We're hearing of divisions already. And it is also a huge expense to our sense of equity and worth and ethics for our planet and our future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And just before we go to questions, I just would like to acknowledge a couple of people in the room. Barnaby Joyce, member for New England, and his lovely wife Vicky, and also previous Mayor Steve Reynolds and his son as well. Thank you for being here today. And we'll start off with you, Mr Kennedy.
Yeah, thank you. Mr Woolley, you were talking about jobs and the importance to the local economy and materials handling. How many jobs, can you tell me about the number of jobs and the average salary of coal-fire power plants in the region?
Not exactly. At Bayswater, there's, I think, 300 or 400 people working.
Yes.
Don't quote me on that. Average salaries, hard to guess nowadays.
Yes.
100,000 maybe. I don't know.
And then in the intermittent power, solar and wind sector, are you familiar with how many jobs, you know, the number of jobs they're doing and the average salaries, how that compares?
That is new technology, and technology gets away from jobs, whether we like it or not. You take the photography business nowadays. You know, there used to be heaps of people selling film, developing film, transporting film. That's what technology does.
So do I take...
So no, there may not be as many jobs in the new industries. That's normal. I don't think that's a reason for not doing it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking on mobile phones. We would have.
Yeah. So no, very helpful. No, so fewer jobs in the renewables sector, and you're unsure of the pay. We've had testimony and quoted this in previous inquiries. The US Department of Energy and Employment have recently done a study, and they found 77% of workers in coal power plants can transition to nuclear power plants. They also found those nuclear power plant workers were paid 14% more on average, 50% more than solar or wind, and they also found they employ more people. Given this evidence from the US that the committee's been subject to, shouldn't we be considering, if you're concerned about jobs, considering nuclear power if we're concerned about jobs and employment for the region?
My comments about jobs were that a lot of people misunderstood the jobs that would be in nuclear. I wasn't saying that it would be wonderful. As I said, technology will change jobs and remove jobs, but that has never in the past been a reason for doing things.
But if we have an opportunity,
You do things
if we
because
have an
it's a good
opportunity to keep jobs and they're better paying jobs, and knowing the average power plant has 500 people, isn't that something the region should look at?
Not if every environmental and economic indicator says that it's a dumb idea.
So we've had a lot of evidence. I think last week I was in Adelaide and we had the former chief scientist there, former South Australian of the Year. We had the head of South Australia's Energy and Mining Chamber, all who are imploring us to look at nuclear, lift the moratorium. They noted their belief that South Australia is having the highest. They made the distinction between the cost to generate and the prices people pay. And they said in South Australia, when the wind's blowing, the sun's shining, it's very cheap to generate, but we actually have the highest power prices in the country, over 76%. They implored us to look at nuclear for South Australia and cut them out and to try and lower prices because I was so concerned about industry. When you said everybody says it's environmentally terrible and the most expensive, we've received a lot of evidence from former chief scientists. Shouldn't we be looking at that if we have evidence like that and considering it as part of our mix?
I'll take the prices first. Why are prices high? Prices are high because of the design of the market. The market is designed to allow large corporations to maximise their profit. Okay? It's not designed to give cheap prices.
So
you can redesign
Can
the
you
market.
explain to me why they're higher in South Australia than every other jurisdiction in Australia in that market?
Because the market works that way. The bulk price of electricity is the same for everybody, Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, South Australia. And it's driven by the highest cost generator online at the moment. It's not driven by the cheapest one online at the moment. It's not driven by anything but the most expensive. And I can tell you that the executives drool over a coming hot day and how they can manipulate the price and get it sky high. That whole marketing thing is why the prices are high. There's heaps of things you can do to change the market to bring the prices down.
Sure. You talked about wealth of the region as well. As part of any nuclear power plant, a region will receive a regional deal, which will include infrastructure funding, services funding, also integrated economic development zones for manufacturing, such as smelting, like Tomago, mineral processing, high technology sectors to provide incentives for those businesses to work there. Isn't this something an area like the Hunter should be looking at, which could have job challenges with coal coming offline?
But at the same time, you look at a place like Hay, where they struggle, they've got climate problems, they've got agriculture which makes a profit sometimes but not otherwise, they've got a town that's shrinking, and they've got people who want to put wind farms and solar farms outside, and they did some very, very good work. They got the developers all together and the people of town in the room together, and they said, what does this town need? They said, we need some aged care facilities, and one of the developers has now agreed to develop, instead of bringing dongers on site and then sending them off site, to put them outside town and arrange them in a way where it can be used in the future as an aged care facility. A different developer has agreed to upgrade his accommodation so that it can be used as cheap housing and brought to town later. So it's not a matter of whether the Hunter can benefit, it's a matter of whether the regions can benefit. And there's a lot of people with a lot of anger and a lot of angst saying a lot of things that are untrue. And the planning system doesn't help, because the planning system allows individual developers to talk to individual landholders, and other people miss out. It's a matter of making the planning system so that the whole community can benefit.
And just on that, do you feel like the planning system and the community consultation for the current rollout of intermittent power, are your comments on that and saying that should be improved and is not operating effectively?
It's disastrous at the moment.
Tell us more about that.
Go for a drive and have a look at all the signs strung up along the road. Go to the communities and listen to a lot of the people. Listen to a lot of the politicians who are driving it.
And what are you hearing about the planning?
Anger, division, fear, false truths.
And that's about the renewable rollout as
Yes.
well? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Ms Hathaway, just on waste, you talked about waste and that's an issue. What's your view on, we were in South Australia last week, there's 125 sites that have waste in Australia, in New South Wales. I think it's in the many hundreds, with hospitals, dentists, nurses. The nuclear submarine industry has waste, obviously ANSTO has waste. Do you accept that nuclear waste is a problem we have and we have to work out where to store that?
Absolutely, because there is not a storage facility that has capacity to deal with the waste.
So what should we do about the waste we already have and the waste we're going to have from medical and submarines?
I would prefer to consider the waste that we do have, because I think our future waste is up to us.
But what should we do with the waste we currently have in the Mudgee environmental group's view?
They are minimal. I'm probably going to use inappropriate words, I'm not sure. Low toxicity, perhaps, and a fairly minimal quantity.
What about?
But even so, there have been accidents at Lucas Heights.
Because some of the
it becomes a hidden cost.
Yes.
That we were speaking of electricity charges, for instance, and there seems to be a lot of perhaps misrepresentation that what we pay for within our energy bill reflects the actual cost of the electricity, which is total bunkum.
Yeah,
so this storage becomes a hidden cost.
Yep.
Because you might not pay for that storage, say, in the UK, where they're looking at Australian estimate of 500 billion to create some storage and management of the waste. You lose, you pay in some other way.
Yes, sorry to cut you off because I'm just short on time because I know the chair will keep me honest here. But so you accept we have waste already and we have to find somewhere to put it though, right?
It is being stored at the moment. Yes. But
we do not yet have a long-term storage facility in Australia.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yes, and that's just something the Albanese government's trying to find, and we're doing our best. You talked about, just a question to the group, you talked about, I think you used the words, okay, it's a disaster, Mr Woolley, in terms of the engagement process with the local community around the renewable and intermittent power rollout. The Coalition's policy for nuclear is to propose a 2.5-year engagement program on nuclear with every local community. As part of that 2.5 years, it will not be political parties engaging, it will not even be government engaging. It'll be appointed independent bodies who actually are there to engage the community, survey them, survey all the groups over a 2.5-year period. Has something like that been done prior to the renewables rollout? Yes or no? And based on that experience, what would you suggest is changed or added to any nuclear engagement process if the Coalition were to win?
As far as I'm aware, the planning process at the moment is that if you buy a block of land and you want to do something on it, you can decide to do it, and then if you want to do a wind farm, well, you start talking to the neighbours, you start talking to the adjoining landholders and the government. That process seems to be taking 2, 3, 4 years, but it's not being very well done. It's being done by individual developers. Sometimes there's 2 or 3 developers in the town. If the government, if a Liberal government is elected and they do that consultation, that's good, but that's not a reason to do it. It's just a way of doing it.
Thank you, Mr. Woolley.
Thank you, Mr Kennedy. Ms Mascarenhas.
Good morning, and thank you for your testimony today. One of the speakers spoke about the reserve capacity, and I was wondering what you see the impact being of introducing a nuclear power station on the price of electricity, and whether that would have an increase the electricity bills of people in your neighbourhood.
Very, very hard to predict. How do you predict the market behaviour of a power station built in 20 years' time? They may decide to generate flat out, no matter what the price, and I just want to generate, get cash flow. They may decide to play some other game. What effect that has on the market at the time is very hard to tell.
Thank you for that. I also wanted to get an understanding of water resources in the region, and if there are agricultural uses for water, and whether you think that there would be enough water for cooling of a nuclear power station and making sure that we're looking after cattle or produce.
The AGL, who owns Bayswater Power Station, owns the top 50 metres of water in Glenbourne Dam. That was arranged back when the Electricity Commission built the power station. They extended the dam wall an extra 50 metres high. Since then, though, the power stations have been buying as many water licences as they can. The agriculture in the Hunter is still there. It still uses a lot of water. There's a lot of competition for the water licences. I'm no expert on exactly how much water is left or where the licences reside.
Thank you. Someone was also speaking about intergenerational equity, and I think you're one of the first speakers that I've heard speak about that. And the thing that I'm wondering from that perspective is what you see as the most alarming for future generations. Is that, does that relate to power prices or in authentic action on climate change? If you could talk about that in a bit more detail.
Yes, thank you. I believe intergenerational equity covers all aspects of our life. Now, without a healthy environment, a stable climate, the biodiversity of our planet, that's what keeps us alive, and non-polluted, sufficient water. The more we pollute water, the less we actually have. So there's equity in those big picture things. I don't pretend to go anywhere near financial equity for future generations. Who knows what that scenario might be. But I believe it is an ethical and responsible matter that we need to be aware of these principles.
I'm happy to leave my questions there and share the call.
Thank you. Dr Molino.
Oh, thanks, Chair. Thanks all for your evidence. Mr Woolley, I just wanted to ask about some of the issues around consultation around renewables projects locally. Do you expect that there would be at least as much and possibly more controversy and complication, community views, if there was a push towards grid-scale nuclear?
It'd be very interesting. I wouldn't like to say one's bigger than the other. I would have thought, though, that the repercussions of a large nuclear industry would have been fairly controversial.
And just one additional question on consultation. We heard from an expert in social licence who had undertaken some analysis of processes in the United States, and she said that it often turned out to be problematic where the location was announced in advance and then consultation occurred, and that what was critical was that the community had a right to say no if there was to be genuine engagement. Would you agree with that, that if there was any kind of consultation or engagement process, that the community needs to have a right to say no and to veto the project?
Gee, that's a can of worms. The easy answer is, well, of course, yes. But how on earth would you make the decision on whether the community was against it and whether it was worth a veto? That's a can of worms. Certainly our current planning system favours greatly the developer. But gee whiz, how you impose some other rigour to that, I wouldn't even hazard to guess.
And just a question on the development of standards and regulation. Do you expect that it would be a complicated process to develop the necessary regulatory regime and standards to apply if we were to move to full-scale nuclear power?
Complicated in many ways. The international organisations do have voluntary standards for many of the safety aspects of nuclear. How applicable they are to Australia, I'm not sure. But you would also have to pick up a lot of other Australian standards that are mandated in our legislation. So yes, it would be a long and complicated process with many aspects to it, technical only one of them.
Thanks. And the last question for Ms Holloway. You talked a bit about waste, and I just wanted to ask a question that we've struggled for a long period of time, for decades, to manage even small amounts of waste and relatively low-grade waste from the facility that we already have here. I mean, how difficult do you imagine it's going to be to deal with what would be much larger volumes of waste and much higher grade waste?
I think it would be extremely difficult because at the moment no country in the world has been able to manage their waste and store it with any confidence that it will remain in that storage facility, that there is no way of dealing with it. Once the genie's out of the box, we can't put it back in. The UK is currently decommissioning their power stations that were built in the 50s, 70s and 90s, and the cost is horrendous.
And do you think we should resolve that issue before we kick off on going down this path?
It has to be a huge red flag in any consideration of nuclear energy generation. To me, it's almost the largest red flag. What are we doing to our planet by creating this huge level of toxic pollution for many thousands of generations? We have no right to do that.
Thank you, Dr. Molino.
Thanks for your evidence. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for providing evidence today. Interested to start with so just want to frame a few things. So we currently have a renewables, gas and coal energy market that I think we can all agree that that's where we currently sit. Under the Liberal National Party's policy direction. They're talking about shifting that to renewables, gas and nuclear. Just interested if we can get a bit of a generalised view here. Do you agree that it's probably 15 to 20 years if the LNP were to be elected next year before we'd see our first nuclear plant come online and provide energy to the grid? Is that the fair estimation?
I think it's too short.
You think it might take longer?
Yes.
Yourself, Mr. Wonnarua?
I mean, I can refer to all of the there have only been 5 plants built in Western countries in the last 35 years. All of them have been hugely overrun in time and cost. 4 were built. The 5th one wasn't built. At the one in South Carolina, the company closed down and just left $9 million on the table, which is not economic. Now, what they're doing in China is a different story.
Yep.
Although China has half the world's reactors planned, 29, I believe, they have in construction, or at the same time in 2023, China's new generation capacity, 12% was coal, 86% was renewable, and 0 was nuclear. So it's clear where other countries are going. And it's cost is the main reason. And no one is tackling. I think Finland has made a reference to Finland. They're building an underground repository in stable geological, stable granite, but no one else is doing it. Now that Americans, the United States government built a repository, and I think Yucca Mountain, I think it's in Utah. It's all set to go, and then the state of Utah said, we do not want this here. Now in Australia, there's been an attempt to put to build a repository for low-level nuclear waste, I think in South Australia. Aboriginal people don't want it on their country either. So you've got this intractable, where are we going to put this? No one wants it in their space. And low-level waste from Lucas Heights is contaminated gloves and stuff like that. This is not, large volumes of high-level waste. We can't just leave this stuff in tanks on these sites for, how long are we going to be there for? Like 100 years, 1,000 years? I mean, this stuff it's very long lasting. It can be dealt with properly and safe. There is a better way to do it than not do it at all. But that's very costly. It has to be done. No one in the world is doing it except Finland's starting to do it. So you have to have that as part of the process. You can't just say, we're just going to leave it there till the life of the plant and then let our grandchildren look after it. This has to be planned as part of the process.
Ms. Hadaway, did you have something to add to that?
I think initially we were talking about timelines. Yeah. And I acknowledge that the consultation for the renewable energy zones has contributed to a delayed timeline there because the planning system is so horrendously complex, and also because of past governments' inability to plan our grid by privatising was probably the first problem. So the whole planning, community consultation, let's go on this journey together, has not occurred in the renewable energy zones. And we have angst and community division. I could not picture the angst, community division and how in the world you would navigate through attempting to create a nuclear energy reactor. We have the legal and policy framework to undo that is there now, and you have community consultation, which we've alluded to is a difficult process in New South Wales at the moment. So that the timeline is likely to expand hugely. It's just not viable.
So the reason why I've asked that about timeline 15 to 20 years, 7 days ago Peter Dutton made a Facebook post, and at the bottom of his post he alludes there that Australians deserve affordable, reliable and cleaner power, and that's what a coalition government will deliver, cheaper power prices, inferring that potentially overnight our power price bills will come down. Now, with a timeline of 15 to 20 years, do you see foreseeably that household residents across this country would expect to see their power prices come down because an LNP government is elected in the 2025 election.
The others have suggested it's a market mechanism created by governments in the past who have privatised everything, and profit is the priority.
So you think it's unlikely?
We're in a real mess with this whole thing. If we could only wind back the clock 10 or 20 years, here's a discussion paper put out in 2017, 100% renewables grid by 2030. A discussion paper from 2017. BZE, Beyond Zero Emissions, had a plan for a renewable energy grid earlier than this one. We've had the answer, but the privatisation of the energy market, with the market forces and the way it operates at the moment, and the players within that, have destroyed any relative genuine cost of electricity to the price you pay on your bill. There's no relationship. It's all just a fiction. But we do have capacity to utilise the developments within the renewable industry as the technology is racing ahead there, and the jobs are there too. 14,000 are needed in the Central West Orana renewable energy zone for the construction. So, you know, a few hundred, I think we said, work at Bayswater. There is ample opportunity to broaden our discussion, look at not only waste, but the whole planning system, our community engagement. For God's sake, we all live on this planet. Can we at least talk together and move on the same pathway with transparent planning, transparent policies that are not bought by vested interests? Take the community with you and we can be there. I have great faith in Australia, but there's blockages that are creating mis and disinformation, and we need to come back to basic principles of equity.
Thank you, Mr Burnell. We've run out of time, so I've just got one quick question. Do you think it's acceptable that the opposition put out a nuclear plan that Mr Burnell has got here, he's been reading from, that has only given 7 sites and has not given any other information in 6 months? It hasn't given the types of reactors they're going to use, the size of reactors they're going to use, the time frame to build each reactor, to hyper-localise this, when will Liddell actually start to get built and how much water is required? Do you think that's acceptable that the Australian public and the people of the Hunter don't know that information?
Not at all. I mean, what are we actually signing up for? I mean, a lot of people are very enthusiastic about it without having any idea what's involved. There was a poll done, maybe I read one poll the other day, 51% of men support the idea of nuclear energy, 26% of women. And when the question is asked, what about if it's in your town, it drops significantly. So there's just no detail, and people are unaware of the actual cost of this. I mean, it's going to take all coal-fired power stations will be closed before the nuclear capacity is not going to replace the coal-fired power stations and doesn't pretend to. So what are we going to do in the meantime? Gas. I mean, currently gas is the most expensive form of electricity generation in Australia. Is that the?
Thank you. Yeah. Just be quick, if that's okay.
It's not acceptable, but it's worked.
Yeah.
We are here. The Leader of the Opposition's name has been mentioned many times. It will be on the front page of a newspaper. Make out an outrageous statement and you get on the front page of a newspaper. It works.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I think ditto.
Unfortunately, we've run out of time today. If you've been asked to provide any additional information, including questions on notice, please forward it to the Secretariat by Friday the 10th of January 2025. Please note that responses to questions on notice will be published on the website as submissions to the inquiry. You'll be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence to assist you with answering questions taken on notice today, and you will have an opportunity to request corrections to transcription errors. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
What was the other guy's name again? Just coming into this one.
We've invited Malcolm.
What was his last name?
Ritter.
Ritter.
And he provided a solution as well.
Yep, excellent. Thank you. I now welcome to give evidence today Mr Wood, Mr Reynolds, Mr White, who's appearing on teleconference, and Mr Ritter.
Good morning.
Good morning. Just give you a couple of seconds. It's all changed. Yeah. They didn't come. Yeah. So, for the Hansard record, would you please state your name and capacity in which you appear before the committee? And we'll start with you, Mr Ritter.
I'm just speaking on my own behalf. Malcolm Ritter, my name, and I don't represent anyone else.
Excellent. Mr White?
Yeah, it's Tim White. I'm the president of Valley Alliance. We're a community group in the northwest around Tamworth with 270 members. It's a not-for-profit organisation made up of farmers, hobby farmers, and some villagers.
Thank you, Mr Wood.
Nigel Wood, I'm here on my own behalf. Just been impacted by the Bermans Creek wind project, and I just want to have my say supporting nuclear.
Excellent. Mr Reynolds?
Steve Reynolds, he's speaking on my own behalf.
Excellent, thank you. This hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Before I invite you to make a brief opening statement, and then we proceed to discussions, would you please state if you're a current or former member of a political party or a union or an investor in the renewable or nuclear industries? Mr Ritter.
I'm not a member of any political party, never have. I am a member of various social groups pushing back against rural renewables.
All good, that's all right. Mr White?
I'm not a member of any of the political parties, and I don't have any affiliations with any lobby groups or the like. I'm just a member of Valley Alliance.
Thank you. Mr Wood?
Yeah, I'm not a member of any political party. I'm not a member of a union, and I haven't got any investments in renewable energy.
So, Mr Reynolds?
I'm not a member of any political party, but a member of the union.
Yep, sweet. Thank you. I now invite you to all make a brief opening statement before we proceed to questions, and we'll start with you, Mr Ritter.
Thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts here today. My name is Malcolm Ritter, and my property at Greenlands is approximately 20 kilometres downwind and southeast of the now closed Liddell power station. I have a good understanding of potential risks from a nuclear facility as well as the benefits, and as such I have absolutely no fear or objection to a nuclear power station being established on the Liddell site. As a third generation farming family, it is very depressing to ponder the imminent desecration and disfigurement of the rural landscape, which will inevitably result from the renewables rollout in the Hunter Valley. And it is for this reason in particular that I'd much rather see nuclear established as either an alternative to the enormous amount of renewables that would be required, or as part of the mix to reduce the overall renewables footprint. I have no doubt that a fair percentage of those opposed to nuclear have a fear because of a lack of understanding of the processes involved. From talking to people and reports I've read, it appears that the younger generation are more accepting of nuclear than those of us who belong to the earlier generations, many of whom would have heard about those nuclear accidents in the past, but don't know the details and the actual cause of the accident. A good example of this is the Fukushima incident, in which the problem wasn't directly the reactor being damaged by the earthquake, but was a result of the resulting tsunami. But there would likely be many who don't understand the mitigating circumstances associated with that incident, i.e. it was located near the coast. Liddell isn't. For what it's worth, I wrote to Minister Tanya Plibersek some time ago virtually pleading to her my concerns regarding the imminent elimination of our local wedge-tailed eagle family, a natural predator of rabbits and hares, which landowners rely on more than ever as we seek to eliminate other predators of rabbits and hares, i.e. wild dogs, feral cats, foxes, etc. As I pointed out to her, I'm old enough to remember the absolute destruction of the landscape caused by the rabbit plague, which continued into the first half of the last century. I firmly believe that that nuclear fusion will be available in the future, and that nuclear fission would be a stepping stone to that technology. I recently mentioned this aspect in a letter to our local newspaper, and a reply to that opinion stated that fusion technology is not yet available, which I know it's not. And my reply to that in turn is not yet available either. That is the end of my...
Thank you, Mr. Ritter. Mr. White, and can I just remind all people online to make sure they put their devices on mute when they're not speaking, please.
Sure, thank you for the opportunity this morning. I'd just like to restate that Valley Alliance is a community organisation with 270 members. We have those members are a large cross-section of probably rural Australia. We range from farming communities to people that work in towns as teachers and healthcare workers. So we're a very good cross-section of rural Australia, I would have thought. We support nuclear electricity generation by large and small reactors for the following reasons. It's a smaller footprint. It can be positioned in already designated power generation locations, such as Liddell and Bayswater. It will avoid the need for hundreds of kilometres of new transmission lines. Rural landholders will not have their properties compulsorily acquired for the transmission line construction. Emissions are zero. It's a proven technology. It's a reliable technology that is available 24/7 days of the week with no need for the firming issues that come with renewables. It is not weather dependent. It is currently covered under nuclear facilities, are currently regulated heavily by the Australian Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety Agency and other international organisations such as the International Atomic Energy Agency. The opportunities for nuclear energy to provide employment opportunities is great, and I think that the skilled personnel that we required that are already in the existing mining industry would easily transfer their skills across to nuclear generation. The time to construction, while discussed there earlier on the line, it looks like it can be an average of 7 to 10 years. They can remain in operation for a much longer period than renewable energy and are far more cost effective. Nuclear energy is in operation in over 50 countries in the world currently, and including first world countries such as Germany, France, America, Sweden, just to name a few. We already have a nuclear research facility in Sydney, and it's been operating for 66 years without incident. There are currently 440 nuclear reactors operating throughout the world, generating electricity. Added to that, Australia has 33% of the world's uranium supplies. The fact that it could be a fantastic new industry for Australia where we could lead the world must be considered in this transition.
Thank you, Mr.
On the other hand, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White. Mr. Wood?
Yeah, I own a grazing property at McCulley's Gap with my wife. We will be impacted by the Bowman's Creek Wind Project. I used to be a general manager in the coal mining industry, retiring a couple of years ago, and part of that role was reviewing capital spend, operating cost, life of asset assessment. My wife and I live approximately 20 kilometres as the crow flies from Liddell Power Station, or the old Liddell Power Station site, and we'd have no trouble at all with nuclear was built on that site. We'd actually welcome it. There's no CO2 emissions from nuclear, and it's a small footprint compared with renewables. Some of the areas I'd like to cover are cost, capital cost, and consultation. We've lived the nightmare of consultation for renewable energy since 2018. That is reality. So just on cost, what I've done, you have to start somewhere, so I've done a comparable cost against Snowy 2 versus nuclear power. The Snowy 2 is a battery, and the power has to come from somewhere. Using the Snowy Hydro business case that was released in May 2024, it will have an output of 5,300 gigawatts per year. That's about 25% of the output of Bayswater Power Station. There's been a lot of numbers bandied around, but the reality is with transmission lines, Snowy 2 will cost $25 billion. That is only part of the story. You get $25 billion to build the facility and the transmission lines. The battery has to be charged. Using their business case at 2,000 megawatts of output, that gives an efficiency of 67%. So it actually requires, to get the 5,300 gigawatts out of it, it requires nearly 8,000 gigawatts of power to replenish the water in the top dam, and that will take nearly 11 hours per day. Where does that power come from? And I've done the numbers on wind turbines. 5 megawatt wind turbines have an efficiency of 30% and will produce 13,140 megawatts per year. It will require 601 5 megawatt wind turbines to recharge the battery at Snowy 2. What will that cost? They're about $12 million each when you put in the transmission, like the transmission line cost feeding into each site and everything, about 7.2 billion. So straight away you've got 32.2 billion building a facility with 25% of the output of Bayswater. And you start using the Burmans Creek Wind Project. It's 12 Burman Creek Wind Projects. Burmans Creek Wind Project is about 15,000 hectares. It will need 180,000 hectares of wind turbine land disturbance, if you like, but impacted to produce the power out of Snowy 2. How the hell does that add up? It doesn't just add up. And you start looking at the $32 billion, it's nearly $1,200 for every single person in Australia based on a population of 29 million. We just clicked over 29 million a lot longer ago. Will the 5,300 gigawatts be available? I've assessed it at a high level, and I think Snowy 2 will actually struggle getting 5,300 gigawatts, but that's another story. Using the CISRO cost for nuclear, and they've reported 8.6 billion capital spend for a 1,000 megawatt nuclear power station. You could build 3.75 nuclear power stations for 32.2 billion. They're 1,000 megawatts. They run at 92% availability, and they will produce 8,059 gigawatts per year, with the 3.75 producing 30,222 gigawatts per year. Dollar for dollar of initial capital investment, nuclear will produce 30,200 compared with 5,300 for Snowy 2. The numbers don't add up. And they're conservative numbers when they've evaluated Snowy 2. So you look at the renewable power, you have to look at the dam levels being empty and full. Everything needs to line up. And you look at the business case, there's actually been comment about the business case on Snowy 2 for everything lining up. That's the big elephant in the room that no one wants to cover is the loss of property value of the neighbours of renewable projects. And the proponents and the government will rely on two reports. One was done in 2009 by Preston and Rowe and Patterson, and the other one was done by Urbis in 2016. Those two reports have forensically analysed them. They are wrong. The majority of properties lose value. And some of the examples I can give is one property near Blaney. They reported it at 80 hectares and worth $8,000 a hectare. So the wind farm at Blaney didn't impact on it. The issue was it was 240 hectares and it was only worth $3,000 a hectare, not the 8,800, whatever it was. And that's half the local area. They were doing other evaluations before and after sales, except they were both after sales. It wasn't a true evaluation. And you look through it all, and it's just completely wrong. And then if you look at the comparison of the size of the turbines at the time, so 2009, 2016, the turbines ranged in height from 69 to 130 metre in height, and a rotor diameter up to 47 metres, given a windswept area of 7,800 square metres. The Bowmans Creek project has a wind tip height of 220 metres, more than double that height, higher than the Sydney Harbour Bridge, twice as high as the Sydney Harbour Bridge. The windswept area is 21,000 square metres. the same size as the Sydney cricket ground, and you're telling me it won't impact on my property of my value, I will see 20 from our home. All right? The reports are wrong, and the governments are not bothering. On consultation, I said to live the nightmare. The proponent for the Bowmans Creek wind project actually sat in, and it was Friday the 13th, April 2018, came and sat in my kitchen and lied to me. I didn't know they were lying at the time. They said they wanted to just run power lines through our place. We wouldn't see any infrastructure at all. The only problem was, within 2 months, they built an illegal wind monitoring tower, which is 120 metres tall, and we could see it from our home. Wouldn't see anything. And then when the plans start coming out, we will see 20 turbines towering up to 600 metres higher than our house. The res zone for the Hunter was actually put up for evaluation, if you like, feedback. 4 weeks. People had 4 weeks of feedback. There was no consultation. People didn't even know it was happening. It was announced. Oh yeah, it's all been announced. And that wasn't just common for the red zone around here, the Hunter Central Coast. I spoke to other people, and it was the same there as well. So people talk about Peter Dutton not consulting people in the nominated areas. It's a bit of an egg and chicken. You go, what comes first? Do you say this is what we're looking at and then consult, or how do you consult without getting out there? But with the res, there wasn't any consultation. This was it. There was no opportunity to say we don't want it, because we don't want it. All right. There was a lot of other stuff. I was on the CCC for the project. The CCC was banned. I actually complained when the chair called me xenophobic because I asked who would be purchasing it from the proponent, because they had a history of getting something approved and selling it to foreign companies. The chair called me xenophobic, and then that was actually published in the minutes. When I complained to the Department of Planning, New South Wales Department of Planning, they disbanded the CCC, so there was no more consultation. Some members of the public, neighbours who will be adversely impacted by the project, were told in consultation by the New South Wales Department of Planning, and the bloke was Clay Preshaw, that they wouldn't recommend approval of the project unless they had neighbour agreements with the people who would be adversely impacted. I was offered a neighbour agreement. It's obnoxious. We were never going to agree to them. And I can give you copies if you want, or I can provide copies of what I was provided with. But they wanted the right to renegotiate your mortgage. You couldn't sell your property, freehold property, couldn't sell your freehold property unless they gave you permission. And it just goes on, the big list of things. And for $6,000 a year, and to see 20 turbines, could never ever complain about anything. They could move the turbines next to your house, could never complain. And we said, well, we're never going to, but the department told us, well, we won't recommend approval. That was just a lie. They did. And it wasn't just me, there's piles of people. Went through extensive discussions. Basically, the proponent said, if you don't accept it, you'll never get anything. It'll get approved. They just knew it was going to get approved. They don't care. There's got stage 2 happening now for the Bowmans Creek stage 2, and the towers are 270 metres tall. I've asked for consultation. I've heard nothing at all.
Thank you, Mr Wood. Mr Reynolds.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chair. And as you know, we've spoken quite frequently about this debate previously. And I just want to speak to, I wish we were here talking about a new Healy coal-fired power station in our region, actually, but to be here talking about the nuclear side of things. I've speak face-to-face with a significant number of the community since this was addressed, the same as the Liddell announcement, the same as the BHP announcement. Overwhelmingly, and as it was reported by the Newcastle Herald journalist, Mr Speaker, that Muswellbrook was more in favour of a nuclear. We have a very power, energy literate community. I do not believe in what was said previously, and I just want to reassure the people of Muswellbrook that technology will not take away the jobs and end up with fewer jobs here. We've got a great elected council that will make sure that we have the jobs moving forward here and the manufacturing jobs. To say that we're going to be a town with no jobs, not correct. The power bills at the moment, and this is one thing that hits home with all of us, we want to talk about the power bill and the cost of living. Currently, from personal experience, I can speak to, we've put on solar on our house, and I'm asking, we've put solar on our house. Our power bill has not gone down. If anything, it's still increasing. We've taken every measure, had electricians at our house to go over and try and assist us to do it. We don't have a pool. We don't have the luxuries of that or any others. We've got a ducted air conditioning that doesn't go all the time. Our electricity bill is still sitting at $1,200 a quarter, and that's recently after being assisted. So what we're looking at and what we're asking for in generally is a balanced energy mix right across the sector, and that includes bringing in something like nuclear that is meeting and ticking all the boxes with regards to the carbon emissions, that provides the steady full-time jobs, and is also protecting our farmland. To put it into, from a Greens for Nuclear report, nuclear plants require less land compared to solar farms. To match the output of a nuclear facility like Hinkley Point, approximately 80 square miles of solar panels would be needed. So when it comes to the wind towers, I don't believe that that's the way of the future. I believe that, yes, solar is, but we need to protect our prime farmland from these situations. That is a massive part. The community benefits. We talk about us now here in Muswellbrook, living in what is the energy capital of Australia, New South Wales, and everyone acknowledges that. The fair share is not there for our community. Council is still fighting. There are several different funds available that will be, we talk about the coal, sorry, that's why I stepped down from council, but we have the future fund type set up that, you can help me there, sorry, Dan, that the mining industry for funding the community, but we don't see any funds from that. Over the past 3 years, I've calculated council is over $30 million behind since the removal of a state-based resources for regions product. We've got a strong history here, and we're very passionate about the industries, and we want to be that main place moving forward. The opportunity for job retention and creation is in a transitioning economy is very important. While renewables will play a vital role in our energy future, moving too quickly down this path without adequate backup solutions could jeopardise job stability and economic stability. Without a doubt, the renewable sector, though growing, does not yet offer the same volume of stable, highly paid jobs as traditional or nuclear energy sectors. So we need a carefully balanced approach that will ensure that the shift to renewables does not leave our community facing economic decline or energy reliability issues. We must apply some common sense to our energy policies, ensuring that we do not outprice our children's future or hinder their ability to compete in a global economy. High energy costs driven by policies that limit the full range of energy options can have a detrimental effect on our economic position, and that's not what we want here for our people in Muswellbrook, and as we heard in the previous statement, they will lose jobs. More recently, there was an announcement of $1.3 billion for an energy hub just down the road that would be approximately 6 jobs. There's a lot in construction. Everyone's talking about all the construction jobs for all types of work being in the renewable sector, but 6 jobs for a $1.3 billion investment. Whether that's private, it doesn't matter, but that speaks volumes. So our community needs policies to prioritise energy security, and I'm asking to cut that tape now and put forward a business plan to show us how nuclear or the likes can assist us with a mixed, in a balanced energy mix. We need job creation for Muswellbrook. When the coal mines and everyone in Sydney sits there and says that we should be shutting down coal mines, tell that to the 600 families. 500 people employed currently at AGL out there at Bayswater earning approximately $1,500 on average, losing their jobs for not like-for-like jobs but lesser paying jobs, and telling the children that that's fine, the jobs will come around, we're just waiting for the construction. So sick and tired of being the poor cousin that's providing all the mix for Sydney and the metropolitan areas. It's time that they really heard us on the ground here and not just listen to respond.
Thank you, Mr Reynolds. Mr Kennedy, we'll start with you, and if we could just be quick with our questions, please. We only have 16 minutes, guys. Okay. We've got Monique Ryan online too.
Sounds good. Just like to clarify, Mr Reynolds, as you said, the coalition policy is for a balanced energy mix. I'll keep my questions quite short. I might interrupt you. The chair's doing his job in keeping me on time. As former mayor, and you quoted some research, do you believe the majority of the Muswellbrook community is supportive of nuclear?
I believe that at present, yes, that there is a very smart energy literate community that is. You will have those people that say no and get out there, but quietly the majority, come up to you and say it's about time. It was either another coal-fired power station or nuclear.
The previous panel, we heard some evidence from Mr Woolley that there'd be fewer jobs. I think Mrs Hadaway said, oh no, there's 3,000 jobs. I didn't catch the exact area she said. Are you aware of, what evidence do you think is right in the community? Is Mr Woolley right when he said there's far fewer jobs from the renewables transition, or was Ms Hadaway correct?
Mr Woolley is correct, and that's as I just stated there with the energy hub. We are, and I have full faith in our local council in now and moving forward to attract jobs and investment into this area. But when it comes to the renewables specifically that you're speaking to, as I said, $1.3 billion was announced on NBN the other night for 6 jobs. So there aren't the jobs there in the renewables. We need to get manufacturing and large-scale industry happening here, and to do that we need stable power.
Thank you, Mr Reynolds. One last question for you, and then I'll go to the others for a quick question. You mentioned you've been a member of a union. Are you aware of other union members who are supportive of nuclear in this region?
To correct that beginning, I'm a lifelong member after my injury and playing the position. But yeah, I believe that there's some in the room behind me that actually too would be backing that. And yes, correct.
Yeah, so you are seeing union members. Okay, fantastic. Mr Wood and Mr Ritter, are you aware under the livestock production assurance accreditation that the government does for grazing livestock, there's a question 2.8 for you to be accredited to graze livestock. Do livestock have access to leaking electrical transformers, capacitors, hydraulic equipment, solar panels, wind turbines, coal gas seam structures or coal mine waste? We have to click yes or no. Is that affecting livestock owners in the area?
It will. It will. I'm not a livestock owner anymore. My son's taken over the property, but I can see that being a big issue.
I'm aware of that. I'm not sure if it will impact. The turbines haven't been built yet at the Bowmans Creek Wind Project. The closest turbines are less than a kilometre from my boundary, and I am aware that waste from the turbines, as they erode, will blow more than 1 kilometre. So I've got to do some homework to see whether I have to declare it or not, and if that will impact on my profitability.
I think, yeah, if your livestock have access to that, I think you have yes, and that may mean that you're unable to graze livestock.
Travel a kilometre.
Yeah.
So I'll have to spend some of my money to analyse whether I will be impacted by residue from the turbine blades, because they do erode, and whether that will then have to be declared.
And if you answer yes to this question, yes, the government, are you aware whether they'll give you compensation if you can no longer graze livestock there?
I'm not sure if you get compensation or not.
Okay, yeah, either am I.
I don't think so. I think you just have to declare it.
Yes, and then the last resident described, Mr White, perhaps a question for you on the phone, the local consultation as disastrous on the intermittent energy rollout. I think you mentioned you represent 270 members. Can you just comment on that, what you're hearing across your 270 members on that rollout?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And just harking back to your previous question, I'm a large-scale commercial sheep grazier, and yes, the LPA accreditation is a significant issue to us with regard to transmission lines and wind farms on our properties. So, and it could definitely inhibit production and our ability to be involved in these different accreditation programs that are undertaken by abattoirs and processors. But again, onto your question about social licence and the consultation that's been going on, it has been one of our main issues with regard to Energy Co, and we met with the Minister last weekend about this. It's been a disgrace. And the consultation, the bullying, everything that's gone on has been a massive overstepping of government powers when involved with these transmission lines.
Can you say more on that? just as being a description, what are some of the vignettes and stories, and how would you contrast that versus a 2.5-year consultation process around nuclear with independent people from government to get the community's buy-in before the final decision is made, which the coalition has announced?
Look, I can't speak to the consultation process for nuclear at this stage, but I can say that with regard to what would have been put through so far, we have, for instance, had Energy Co personnel arriving on properties unannounced and sitting down with people and saying, listen, if you do not take these lines as we are suggesting, we will put them on, we will compulsorily acquire your land and you will have to put up with it regardless. We've had comments along the lines of, it's like a death in the family, you'll have to get over it regardless of what you like. So put up with it or, get on with it. We've had, look, I cannot overstate the mental health issues that are going on within the community. The lack of provision of mental health services with regard to this consultation has been absolutely ridiculous. It's been low. We have had to provide our own mental health services through Farmgate and the like. Energy Co have provided a 1-800 number to impacted landholders only, people that are directly impacted, no one that is visually impacted or people that are impacted by location to the lines but not directly impacted are not able to access these services. So we have a huge amount of people, older age people, farming is an older, it's getting older, and people that don't have access to technology do not have the same rights of access or the ability to access the communication that is coming out by these companies. Nothing is sent out by mail, and there is very, very little consultation that, other than shock tactics, that is occurring within the community. We're being told what we're getting and not how we are getting it, and the best way to, they're not working with us to actually provide the best routes due to local knowledge or what people want.
Thank you, Mr Kennedy. Dr Molino.
Oh, thanks, Chair, and thanks very much to all of you for your evidence. I just wanted to follow up, and I think it's Mr Wood and Mr Reynolds who I've been hearing talking about consultation and social licence, and I think both of you have raised some challenges with the current process in relation to some renewables projects. I just wanted to ask, are you aware a lot of the core elements of the consultation process that is currently being used for renewables was set up by the previous government, by the previous Liberal National government?
Oh, mate, it's Steve Reynolds speaking. Look, it wasn't me that brought it up, might have been one of the other two, but at the moment it's not a matter of looking at it, who done it, it's about having a collaborative approach moving forward. I'm just speaking from the community perspective of the ratepayers that come to me about this. So, it could be the fault of the previous government or current government. We just want someone to put their hand up and lead the way.
I can answer that. We had Energy Co come into our house just over 12 months ago now. They attached a black plastic bag to our gate, and we got an envelope inside it telling us they'd been on our property and assessed it, and if we wanted more information we should give them a ring and organise a meeting. So I gave them a ring, asked if they would pay for a lawyer. They refused, so I told them I would be audio and video recording the meeting. They came to the meeting at our house, and even though they knew they were being audio and video recorded, and Dice then, and the editor of the local paper, was also there at my request, they lied to me. And they said they'd like to have an access agreement with me, and they just wanted to have a walk around the property to have a look. They want to put 4.5 kilometres of power line, transmission line through our property. And I said, well, I'm not agreeing to anything unless I get some legal advice that you refuse to pay me. And then I went to a meeting in Scone just over a week later, and there's a flyer there, field investigations, land access agreements, and there's literally item after item after item they can do under a field investigation: auger drilling, test pits, cone penetration test, site test, boreholes, and it goes on, noise monitoring, utility hydrology investigations. And protecting your property, we will make every effort to ensure investigation work is carried out to safely and minimal disruption to your property. No compensation, just come marching in. So they lied about it, and then that's what they want to do. They haven't been on my property, on that property. They trespassed on another property, and I caught them, and I burned up about that. That is consultation on how not to do it, and it's just on and on and on. Like I said before, we're living in the nightmare.
Final question, Dr. Molina.
No, I hear about a lot of the issues that are going on. I guess I'm just raising it because the opposition is saying that with a potentially very controversial form of energy, they're going to have a 2.5-year process. But a lot of the aspects of the process that you're talking about, for example, Energy Co and its role, was in fact set up under that previous government. So just going to the question, I suppose, of how credible the future process will be. And just one specific aspect of the policy that's been announced that has been raised as potentially problematic, and that is the fact that as part of their process, they've announced the sites at the start of the process, and then there will be consultation afterwards. But the sites, in a sense, are given as a fait accompli. An expert in social licence who gave it to us last week said that it's absolutely critical that communities feel that they have the potential to say no to a process like this, and that there needs to be what she called voluntarism. Would you agree that if there is going to be engagement with the community, it needs to be genuine and the community needs to be able to say no?
100% correct. Yes, it does need to be that way, not these, also these little bespoke areas where they can go and speak. General community consultation needs to be done. I forgot the royalties for rejuvenation and royalties for regions. Funding just then, Mr White, we all make mistakes, but we all learn from them. So I'm hoping that any consultation moving forward will be much better.
As long as it's balanced consultation, because we're not getting balanced consultation now. We've been told by the renewable energy proponents, this is it. There isn't any consultation. We've been told by the New Nationals, this is it. You will do as you're told. They came to my house and I said, how do you work out where the perimeter of my garden is? I will tell you where your garden is. Oh, rightio, thank you very much. We will tell you how many turbines you will see and how you'll be impacted. And I go, well, it doesn't comply with your legislation. The photomontages you provided. Hard luck. That's what we're getting now.
Thank you. Dr. Ryan.
No, thanks, Chair.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I hope you can hear me okay. So I'm really interested in this, and it's really distressing to hear how upsetting the process of, or lack of consultation, obviously people feel that way, has been for local residents. I'm just wondering, how do you suggest that it be done better? As a question for anyone on the panel. What could be done better for the government to obtain lasting social licence from residents for any development, whether it be nuclear or wind?
I can speak to that. I say that you need a presence on the ground here, an office here that people can go to and establish multiple different opportunities for people to connect and have their questions answered, but it needs to happen in the exact area that it's happening, not in Sydney and having meetings up here now and then. They need a face on the ground in the areas that are impacted.
I'd like to comment on that as well, just on consultation. It needs to be organised at a time that people can actually get along. A lot of the consultation that's gone ahead, it goes ahead when people are at work, and there's only one meeting, there's not multiple meetings. People need to understand in this area particularly, there's a lot of shift workers who would like to get along, but if you're rostered on for a 12-hour shift, and the majority of people in this area are 12-hour shifts, so the shift workers, you can't then go along to a 3-hour meeting and rock up for another 12-hour shift. You need it spread over a period of time and give people the opportunity to actually go along and be consulted with.
Could I jump in there?
Yes.
I'd say that it has to be done with a genuine desire for a beneficial outcome for all parties involved. Currently, with Energy Co, that is not the case. They have an outcome that they need to happen that is due to a target that's been set for them by the government, and they do not care what the communities that are involved, what the impact of those communities is. So until you get a genuine desire for an outcome that suits all, then you will not move forward.
Okay. So we're hearing sort of a genuine outcome, lots of opportunities to meet with the people involved, a physical presence in the community for a period of time. And then the other question is the mental health supports that you mentioned. I'm really it's distressing to hear that they weren't adequate for what was required. Obviously, mental health care in Australia is a bit of an issue, and there's lots of shortages in the workforce. Are you able to provide any insight into what sort of model might be appropriate for supporting people who are distressed by the process of consultation or the rollout of this new infrastructure?
AGL got that right. Sorry.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah, you go for it, mate.
And I would say there are a lot of programs in place for farmers. I mean, farmers obviously have a suicide rate that is twice that of the rest of the community. And there are some very good programs in place that are addressing those issues currently. Farming communities are the ones that are being impacted by these transmission lines and the renewables project. And those programs should be rolled out to a wider audience. Rather than having a separate mental health helpline that's controlled by Energy Co, that basically is not anonymous and that people are very concerned about and not able to access in certain instances. It needs to be more of a consultative process where people can have face-to-face conversations. Someone with people they can trust.
That's actually separate from the energy companies. I mean, obviously there's questions of people's personal data and information and privacy as well. So it really does need to be quite separate. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. We're out of time, but I've just got one quick question. Mr. Reynolds, there's thousands of jobs planned at the Liddell Power Station site that's owned by AGL, where one of the nuclear reactors proposed for our area. Do you think that those thousands of jobs should be ripped away from our area, or do you think that is it acceptable to put a nuclear power station on that will host about 300 jobs?
Look, I believe that we need the well-paying jobs as well as that, to be honest with you, and I can't see why we cannot in the future look at other business, the Bayswater 2 site that we speak of, why it can't be just looked at in that corridor somewhere for it to happen and coexist.
What the opposition's proposed, though, is the site at Liddell, where AGL already has plans there, and you were there with us when we announced those plans, and that is for thousands of jobs in solar manufacturing, in recycling, in so many different things in that area. And my fear is if this happens, those jobs are taken straight away from your community, from the Singleton community, from the Cessnock community, from communities all around this area.
Like I said, I'd like to think that they could both coexist, and that I'd ask that the both sides of government take that into consideration when making a decision.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds.
Yeah. Just AGL own 10,000 hectares at Bayswater and Liddell. There's plenty of real estate.
Yep, okay. I think it's got a lot to do with planning and what you can do on those lands, as Mr. Reynolds will know, that you can't do anything else on a power station besides produce power and deliver power. That is the regulations that are around that. But that's something else we could talk about another time. Unfortunately, we've run out of time today. Thank you for your time. If you've been asked to provide any additional information, including questions on notice, please forward it to the Secretariat by Friday the 10th of January 2025. Please note that responses to questions on notice will be published on the website as submissions to the inquiry. You'll be sent a copy of the transcription of your evidence to assist you with questions taken on notice today, and you'll have the opportunity to make corrections to transcription errors. And Mr. Wood, if you'd like to send those papers through to the Secretariat that you spoke about earlier today, you're more than welcome to as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen, and sorry to hear about your...
Cheers, buddy.
Thank you for sharing.
I'm struggling, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, mate. Thank you for sharing that. That was great.
Thank you, guys.
Can I interrupt? We've had a rate request from Nuclear Climate Australia.
Hello?
Rolling straight through. Yeah, good.
Hello, this is Greg Stewart.
Thank you, guys. I now welcome the Mining and Energy Union, Northern Mining and New South Wales Energy District to give evidence today. I now welcome the Mining and Energy Union, Northern Mining and New South Wales Energy District to give evidence today. Excuse me, guys, can we just have a bit of respect for the witnesses that are here and have some quiet down the back? Excuse me, guys, if you're going to talk, can you please leave the room and have some respect for the witnesses at the front here? For the Hansard record, would you please state your name and capacity which you appear before the committee?
Robin Williams, and I'm the District President of the Mining and Energy Union, Northern Mining and New South Wales Energy District.
My name's Scott King. I'm an assistant power plant operator at Eraring Power Station and a Mining and Energy Union delegate.
Thank you. This hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Before I invite you to make a brief opening statement, let me proceed to discussions. Would you please state if you're a current or former member of a political party or a union, or an investor in the renewable or nuclear industries, please?
Well, the last one I'm not, but the first two I'm an active member of the ALP and a member of the Mining and Energy Union.
Thank you very much.
I'm a member of the Mining and Energy Union.
Thank you. I now invite you to make a brief opening statement before we go to questions.
All right, well, I've already stated who I am. So our union covers more than 24,000 members nationally and 9,400 members in the district branch, working mostly in coal mining and coal-fired power generation. Our district covers workers at Eraring, Bayswater, Vales Point and Mount Piper Power Station. And nationally we cover power plant workers in the Latrobe Valley, Western Australia, Queensland. These are all the sites proposed by the Coalition for Nuclear Power. Our union has long advocated for coordination and support for energy workers and communities like ours, where power stations have been closing and will continue to do so. There's an urgent need for workforce support and investment in diversifying our regional economy, but we believe the Coalition's policy for nuclear energy is unrealistic and it won't come to fruition. The expert advice is that time has passed for Australia to create an economic viable nuclear industry in a time frame that we need. The majority of our coal-fired power workforce need jobs and power station closures in the next 10 years. After that, they will move to new areas and industries. None of our energy companies are interested in building nuclear power stations. We think it's a distraction from the work that needs to happen immediately to diversify our regional energy economies for the major changes ahead, and the prospects of future nuclear power plants could be a disincentive for future investments. The Coalition had 3 terms in office federally to develop a coherent energy policy which could have included nuclear, but they chose not to. They provide no support to displaced workers from the 5 coal power stations that have closed on their watch. They develop no plans to support workers from the 5 coal-fired power stations around Australia that will close in the next 5 years, and voted against the Net Zero Economy Authority established to provide support. Instead of real action, the Coalition has simply engaged in energy culture wars, and I believe that's what they are continuing to do now, with their vague and unrealistic nuclear policy that does nothing to provide jobs in the time frame our energy workers need. I'm here today with Scott King, an operator from Eraring Power Station, who will also say a few words.
Thank you, Mr King.
G'day, I'm Scott King. I'm an assistant power plant operator at Eraring Power Station, and I'm a Mining and Energy Union delegate. My workmates and I think that the current proposal to build a nuclear power plant on existing coal-fired power station sites is a poorly considered option for our future energy industry. Apart from the infrastructure and logistical challenges like sourcing cooling water and the transportation and storage of uranium to plants and removal of nuclear waste from this type of power station, the timelines for us just don't add up, especially when it comes to the workforce. The power station that I work at is closing in 2027. The projections show that most power stations have an accelerated pathway towards closure over the next 5 to 10 years. As our industry winds up, all of the advanced boiler and turbine experience in the workplace will disappear as people like me move into new jobs. You can't get that knowledge and experience back in 15 to 20 years' time. History shows that the government's proposal to build these plants will likely face massive financial and time-based blowouts. The New South Wales government has previously shown it has no appetite for continuing to own, operate and maintain power stations, let alone build a new one. This proposal means that we would potentially face a nuclear future with the most technologically advanced power generation system built for profit by the lowest bidder. I've talked about this with my workmates, about the continual cost-cutting in our industry and about our ongoing safety concerns. These concerns are a legitimate issue. What does our future look like with an inexperienced workforce operating and maintaining a nuclear plant to a cost, not to a standard? If any of the critical incidents that have occurred in coal-fired power stations over the years had occurred in a nuclear plant, the result would be catastrophic, not just for the people working at the station, but for the entire community surrounding them and possibly for the entire country. We're definitely concerned about moving into skilled jobs once the power station closes, and that's one of the reasons why I've been a strong advocate for the Net Zero Economy Authority. This is so we have a coordinated support network that backs us up as we move forward. Gambling with our future on a nuclear plant sounds nonsensical to me.
Thank you, Mr King. We'll start with you, Mr Kennedy.
Yeah, thank you. Mr Williams, late Jeff Dyke, first of all, for or against nuclear? You're against nuclear, is that what I take from your evidence? And apologies if I cut you off, the Chair's keeping us, we're short on time.
No, I wouldn't say I'm against nuclear, but what I'm against is the prospects of what you're proposing at this point in time.
So are you for lifting the nuclear prohibition in Australia?
No, I'm not for lifting the prohibition.
So how are you not against nuclear then?
My point would be that if there was a development of nuclear power stations, nuclear power, then our union has the ability to cover those workers, and at that point we'd do so.
But you're against lifting the nuclear prohibition?
At this point in time,
So
I am against lifting the nuclear prohibition,
okay.
yes.
So, late Jeff Dyke, who was speaking on behalf of the MEU to a parliamentary inquiry in 2022, said, and I'll just quote you his opening statement, "We believe the only cost-effective and viable source of power would be nuclear. Australia has got large uranium reserves. We have an ideal waste storage environment in that we are geologically stable and dry, and there are plenty of remote areas. We have well-educated and skilled workers, stable government, good industry regulation, and probably more importantly, communities that need viable transitions. And that is a critical part of the social licence for establishing a nuclear industry. Fourth-generation nuclear power designs are much safer." He went on to say, "The ban on nuclear in Australia makes no logical sense. We regard it as emotive and it is out of step with other developed countries." So what's changed since 2022?
Jeff Dyke's no longer with us.
But he was speaking on behalf of your organisation. You said you have 24,000 members. He was representing a fair chunk of those. So what has changed in representing those members?
Jeff Dyke was speaking on behalf of the district that he represented, and that was obviously Jeff Dyke's view at that point in time.
So it
doesn't necessarily mean that it's the view of the union.
It's not true your 24,000 members hold the views you just articulated?
Some may well.
Some may not, though, as well.
Correct.
Okay, good. Good, we've got that established. In what industries do you think these 24,000 workers are going to transition to?
Well, our view is they probably wouldn't even be our members, but they would transition into infrastructure-type jobs. The Liddell battery, they could transition into those. There's no reason why they couldn't transition into removal of any other types of minerals that would be certainly used for manufacturing of renewable components.
So a study from the US Department of Energy and Employment has found 77% of workers in coal-fired power plants can seamlessly transition to nuclear. They're paid on average 14% more and 50% more than solar and wind. Which of your members would not want a pay rise to go into nuclear and would rather go into these other lower payer industries?
Well, our members won't have a nuclear industry to go to. My understanding is it'll take in excess of 15 years. We've got people who are losing their jobs 2027. Bayswater Power Station closes in 2033, if not before. And then we've got Mount Arthur Coal Mine closing in 2030. Them nuclear jobs, they're not there. There are no jobs.
Just to correct the record, we've heard evidence from sort of 10 to 20 years. It's probably been. We've had some say 8 and earlier, but I think most of the evidence has been 10 to 20 years in that range, and most actually 10 to 15. At least that I've heard. So that puts you in mid-2030s. Around where you are, sir, has been extended. If there was an opportunity to extend the local coal power fire station here a couple of years to allow for a transition to nuclear, would you be supportive of that?
We would be supportive of extending coal for as long as we need coal to give us baseload and reliable power.
And does that include to transition to nuclear? So these 77% of workers can transition to higher paying jobs?
I'm not sure that the time frame will line up. That's my concern.
But if you could get assurance on that, would you be supportive of it?
If you could get an absolute assurance, then you'd certainly have to consider that.
Good. And I appreciate that answer, because I think that's exactly what the Coalition wants to do. If the Coalition is successful in the next election, what they propose is a 2.5-year consultation period where there's independent experts who would consult with your members, who would consult with the community, who would consult with the workforce, independent of the Liberal Party, independent of government. Very different to what we've heard from previous evidence today about the intermittent power consultation. And then, so doesn't that sound like a good process to engage your members, to engage your workforce, to see if there's an opportunity to actually transition them to higher paying jobs?
Well, I'm not an expert in timeframes, but the information that I've read suggests that it's more like 15 years. Appreciate you're going to take the 10-year approach because that suits your argument. You know, I'm a bit of a realist and I think it would be more than 10 years. I think it's more like 15 years. And the concern that our union has got is there is no viable transition from what we're doing today currently into what the Coalition's proposing for the future.
Thank you. I'm right for now, Chair. I might circle back at the end.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. We'll go to Dr. Ryan for, next.
Thank you. I'm wondering. Actually, no. I'm going to pass you. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. We'll go to Mr. Burnell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you both for providing evidence today. I want to pick up from where Mr. Kennedy was just asking some questions before about workforce and timelines. Now, some of my concern would go to the fact that if, best case scenario, Mr. Kennedy might be right. There's not a lot of detail in the current 6-page policy document, but say they land it, all well and good. If they don't, what's the impact to the local community, to the workforces, if this false hope is provided and we don't land power generation from nuclear facilities inside of 10 to 12 years and it blows out to 15, 20 years? What will that do to the local communities, local workforces? What does that mean for your family, Scott? I'm keen to get some of your thoughts, mate.
It's a difficult thing to look at. In terms of our power station, we've got about 200 full-time employees. There's about another 200 to 250 full-time contractors that work there. The ripple effect when our power station closes is there'll be 1,000 jobs lost in our community. To hang your hat on the hope of something that might happen in 15 years' time, when we're closing in 2, potentially 3 or 4, there's a long time in the middle, and it doesn't matter how you fudge those figures. It's a long time. Where those people go and what they do in the way of employment and how it impacts their households, their family and community, that's a pretty grey area to look at and say, well, you know, we'll just hold our breath and hope. Fingers crossed everything's going to be good in a decade or more.
Okay. The other part of that is extending the life of these coal-fired power stations. like how intensive are maintenance cycles going to become? As you know, if we, from hearing what Mr. Kennedy just said, that's the LNP's plan, is that they're going to try and extend the life of these coal-fired power stations until they can bring nuclear power on. Like, is there concerns around potential reliability issues once we push out past, say, 2030, pushing towards 2040? Is it likely that we would expect more intermittent shutdowns, etc., that aren't scheduled?
I think as far as maintenance schedules are concerned for coal-fired power stations, our power station, for example, has a pretty stringent regime of how they do like long-term strategies for like major outages. Like any business that runs a generator like that, you're going to have times where you have forced outages, but our long-term strategies are in place years and years in advance. There are power stations that have run a lot longer than we have. All it would be is simply a case of extending the current strategies out to a future point.
If I can go to the two questions you raised. To be brutally frank, if we don't have a smooth transition from one to the other, regardless of what that is, then these communities will be decimated. You know, if people think that there's going to be this club here and there's going to be the local butcher shop and someone selling coffee, those shops will all close. But it has ramifications, you know, that flow downhill. People that own houses in these local communities have got a value on their house today. That won't be the value that those people have on their houses tomorrow, or in fact any of the land. So unless we've got a smooth transition to keep people in these areas, and a smooth transition means we need to be training people. We can't have a process where we just go, well, okay, we might have something at this point in time and we might need to train them up. Well, you need to train people up for what you've got for them to go to in the future. So obviously training would be fairly important, and that's why it needs to be seamless. When you're talking about sweating the assets, now Scott does work for a company. I know he works at Eraring, but I attended a conference we had 2 years ago, and we had delegates from Queensland, Victoria, WA, as well as here in New South Wales. And a number of those delegates raised concerns with us directly, the leadership of the union, that those companies will sweat their assets. They're already doing it. There was an example given from one of the power stations in Victoria where a large piece of equipment suspended from the roof, because that's how power stations are made up, had not been inspected, effectively fell down, crushed, smashed through a walkway. It would have crushed an individual had that individual been working there. And I've dealt with a lot of coal companies in particular and some energy companies in my time as a union official, and I guarantee you these companies, they won't spend 1 cent that they don't have to. And if the government, any government of the day, thinks that they can extend the life of a power station with a private enterprise and it's not going to cost a lot of money, then they're sadly mistaken, because these coal companies will hold you to ransom, and we've experienced a little bit of that out of Eraring in relation to coal contracts with the Centennial Group. So you probably won't hear me say too many nice things about some of these types of people that we're dealing with.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Mr. Burnell. Dr. Molino.
Oh, thanks, Chair. So I just wanted to explore one of the risk areas that has been raised in these hearings today, and that is the construction time. There are aspirations to get plants underway in the mid-2030s, but when we look at comparable economies like the UK and the US, there are prominent examples of plants where construction times blew out. So Vogel in Georgia, for example, I think it was expected to take 7 or 8 years and took 15, and similarly in the UK, Hinkley's been extended a number of times. Just interested in your thoughts on what some of it would be if construction time actually did blow out in practice, as has occurred in those countries.
Well, from my perspective, I'm not sure that I ever hear of too many projects, whether it's from building a residential property to building a bridge or a roadway. Every project blows out. They just all blow out. And unfortunately, I guess, and a number of people within the community will probably resonate with this comment, every time it's a government who is building a project, they inevitably blow out. They've got to reforecast the costs, they've got to do all sorts of stuff, because there seems to be a bit of a perception that if it's a government-funded project, that we can probably bill them the top dollar. So, you know, I would think that these projects would blow out. The costs would be much worse. Again, I'm not an expert in this area. I only read the material that's available. But, you know, I think you'd have to be a pretty brave person to suggest that any building of any project's not going to blow out. And the bigger the project, the bigger the cost and the longer the lead time. So I think that that would be a fair comment.
And it would also have consequences for worker transition, presumably.
Oh, absolutely. Again, it's the point that I raised a little earlier. We need a process where we've got more of a seamless transition from one to another. We need to have pretty close timeframes because we need to make sure that we can train people up so that they can transition into new industries. You know, you look at the coal industry, we've got a lot of tradespeople. The energy division, we've got a lot of tradespeople. Those people are probably easier, especially if you're talking about electricians, to train them up for new industries. And you know, fitter and turners, mechanics, those types of people likewise a bit easier. But when you're talking about the coal industry, in largely the operational type activities is 80% of the workforce, then there's a fair bit more training that would need to be applied to those people to give them the ability to transition into some of those other areas.
And just on another risk around water, what are some of the risks you see around not just accessing water, but for example, storing and discharging contaminated water, radioactive water, after it's been used for cooling?
I think to look at a site like Liddell, it's an interesting dilemma whether it's going to be a closed loop cycle or whether it's a once through process. Each of those processes will use a significantly different amount of water. In the event that you do have some sort of critical incident, how that waterway is impacted, that remains to be seen. I'd have to leave that to the experts.
But it could take. It's another example of an issue that would take a lot of working through, very site-specific issues to deal with, either storage or discharge.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we're a country that goes through some pretty horrific droughts, get to a point where we've got no water, I don't know how you're going to keep them cool.
Look, I'm aware of Lake Liddell. I'm not sure exactly how much water's in Lake Liddell. I wouldn't have the expertise to be able to make a comment with respect to whether that body of water could cope with it in any way, shape or form, to be honest.
Okay, that's all from me.
Thank you, Dr. Molina. Do you want to go again?
Yeah, we were just talking about the Labor Party's adopted the AEMO ISP as its policy, the step change scenario. So it's a policy that lays out when they see different energy sources coming on. As part of that, they're retiring coal-fired power plants before the end of their useful economic life by use of a shadow carbon price, so earlier than what the retailers would actually close them. Are you supportive of that?
Well, what I said a little earlier, I'm supportive of keeping power stations running so that we can make sure that we have enough power in the system. And I think that there's probably a good example in relation to Eraring. We're certainly supporters of Eraring continue to operate for those reasons. Now, I appreciate AEMO and others do modelling and they can tell us what they tell us, but you'd have to be realistic with respect to if at some point you get to a stage where you don't think there's enough power, then you should keep the power stations online, in my view.
Yeah, so I don't want to verbal you, but you know, you have concerns about the current plan. Is that, I'm honestly not trying to verbal you here. Tell me if that's a fair...
No, I don't have concerns about the current plan, but what I don't know is when you get to that point in time, if there's a requirement to keep a power station going, then you should.
So no concerns, you're supportive of early retirement of coal before its economic life then? That's what's in the current plan?
Only if we've got enough power in this.
Supportive of early retirement. Okay. And look, I honestly don't mean to cause any offence about this, but the about-face change in some of MEU's policy, and that quote that I just read, where, you know, how definitive that was on, we believe it's the only clean power source that Australia should be using. nuclear, and now saying, no, we're for the current plan, we're against lifting the moratorium. You know, has there been conversations with the ALP since they've announced this policy about the MEU's previous stance and previous public comments?
You're referring to Jeff Dyke's comments?
Yeah.
Well, Jeff Dyke's comments are Jeff Dyke's comments. That doesn't mean that they were reflective of the leadership of our union.
Well, he made them to a parliamentary inquiry under parliamentary oath, and as you said, you've got 24,000 members. I assume he represented a fair proportion of those, I'm sure. Victoria, okay. And now Victoria's changed its stance. So just ask the question again, was there conversations with the Australian Labor Party and the MEU about those comments and about your current policy?
Not with me.
No, are you aware of any other conversations or comments about that?
No, I'm not.
You're not? Okay. We also talked about water. Are you aware of a Harvard 2017 study that says a standard nuclear power facility uses about the same amount of water as a coal-fired power station plant, and would that alleviate some of your concerns?
I'm not aware of the document you refer to.
Yes.
But I did Google it, and it did suggest that it could potentially be roughly the same with respect to water.
Yeah. And the previous panel, we just heard some evidence that I wasn't aware of, where they grazing livestock, they have to fill out a form and say their livestock don't have access to paddocks that may have wind turbine or solar runoff. When you're worried about water, do your concerns also relate to, well, if these livestock can't have access to paddocks that may have had wind or solar runoff, do you worry about that with the water supply as well, or not? And if not, why not?
It was the question about water was a question raised with us. We didn't raise that.
I'm raising the question now. Are you worried about water with what we just heard in that last testimony about it pollutes livestock? Livestock can't be in paddocks around that. Do you worry about that as a concern?
So livestock can't be around paddocks that have got a wind turbine, is that what you said?
Yeah, so the exact, I can read it for you if you like. I read it out to the
Please table that, Mr. Kennedy.
Yeah, absolutely.
That information.
Absolutely. It's just a screenshot from the LPA accreditation site. Food and safety on your property. Do livestock have access to leaking electrical transformers, capacity hydraulic equipment, solar panels, wind turbines, coal seam gas structures, or coal mine structures? So I guess in this case it's about solar panels and wind turbines, and the farmers have to answer yes or no. And then if they answer yes, it can impact their ability to have livestock even in that area. Or if they'll have those concerns around livestock, are there also similar concerns you have around water?
I'm not an expert in the area. I don't really know. All I know is the fact that you need water for a power station, you need water for a nuclear power station. That's the detail I have. I have no knowledge of whether livestock will be impacted by renewables you refer to. I have no knowledge of that at all.
Yep. Okay. No further questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Thank you for coming in, guys. It's a pleasure having you here. Do you know of anybody that has any of the power stations that have been approached and asked to close down early from the Labor Party, from the current government?
None. It's not been raised with me, so none that I'm aware of.
And are you aware that the power stations have chose their own dates to close down by their economic benefits to what they're getting out of it and that sort of stuff? Do you think they're making that choice themselves, or is government pushing into that choice?
They're private enterprise. They're making the decision themselves. And if we didn't have a situation where they had to give the notice that they do today, then they'd be no different to any other business. They'd give our members a month's notice and say that there's no more work.
Yeah. How much notice does a power station have to give members and workers of the power station notice that they will be coming to the end of life at some stage?
Well, I understand they've got to notify the regulator. I'm pretty sure it's 5 years. But not necessarily that would apply to a worker. That's the closure of a power station. You know, if a power station wanted to restructure their employees, they can give much less notice. It can be the term as stated in the employment contract, which could be
going through that now. We've got people at our power station that have been given 4 weeks' notice to leave.
Yep.
Guys that have been there for 30 or 40 years.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Because as we get closer and closer towards our end date, The company is looking to thin everything down as much as they possibly can.
Yep. Thank you, Mr King. I've just got the policy booklet from the opposition here. It's a 5-page document with a front cover on it. And in it says, a federal coalition government will initially develop 2 establishment projects using either a small modular reactors or modern large plants such as AP1000 or APR 1400. They will start producing electricity by 2035 with the small modular reactors, or 2037 if modern larger plants are found to be the best option. Do you know whether they've spoken to any of the people around these 7 sites, the workforces, the unions, or any of the local government areas about which will be the 2 first sites that get done first? Do you know whether they've spoken to AGL and Liddell, whether we're going to be one of the first sites?
I certainly have no knowledge of any information being provided to AGL or Origin or anybody. I'm not aware of that. I just find it a bit funny. Again, I'm not an expert, but small modular reactors, my understanding is that they're not commercially available at this stage.
That's right, they're not currently at this stage, yes. Have they reached out to any of the unions or your union and spoke to you about this, about whether Liddell will be the first one or whether it will be one of the last ones that gets completed?
We've not been contacted at all, so we have no knowledge about where the first reactor would be built.
No worries, thank you. And do you think it's disingenuous of the coalition to come out with a false hope for workforce? This is more directed at you, Mr King, because you work in this workforce. You're directly affected by this, and saying that they can have a nuclear power station working by 2037 in this country, when we've heard from experts that are telling us that it's going to take 8 to 10 years just at the regulatory framework, that we've heard from other people around the world that on average it's taken 17 to 23 years to build a nuclear power station. Do you think that's fair on your workmates and yourself?
No, I don't. To go through the process that we've been through for the last couple of years, where, I mean, originally we were told that we were a power station that was going to be open until 2032. We had our lifeblood ripped out from underneath us when Origin came out and said we're closing in 2025. They've spent the last 18 months in cahoots with the government to try and get themselves a better deal so that they'd stay open for another 2 years, potentially 4 years if the market's in a good position for them. They're using the workers in the power station, and all power stations will fall to the same point, where we'll get used as pawns in a political game to try and keep all of this open. Now, if we're going to run everything on the false hope of a nuclear energy industry that could be here in 10 to 15 years' time, you're talking about going through a couple of years' worth of community consultation and then all of the BS that will sit with, you know, regulatory compliance before we actually start construction. Then we're likely to see a cost and a time blowout. All of the people in our industry who hold all of the experience that will be required to run these power stations, they won't be there anymore. They'll have left. You can't turn on a nuclear reactor and have Joe Bloggs from, you know, Retrovision down the road pick up a 5-week course, or ask people to leave their jobs pulling cafe lattes in the local cafe and say, come and learn how to drive a nuclear power plant in the next 3 or 4 weeks and jump in and have a go. It's not as simple as that. You know, even to be an operator in a coal-fired power station takes a minimum of 5 years' experience before you've cut your teeth to a point where you're considered competent at your job. To turn around and say those people will walk away from that industry for 10 to 15 years and then just up stumps and come back from wherever they are in the country and take up roles again, that's farcical. It really is.
Would you like to add anything to that, Mr Williams?
I guess from my concern, it's really disappointing that people want to play political games with people's lives. You know, we're a mining and energy union. It would have been really simple for our division to stand up in front of our members. Obviously those members live in the communities and they go back to their homes overnight, and just simply say to them, oh look, the mining and energy union is going to continue to bang the drum for a coal-fired power station or a coal-fired power station with carbon capture and storage. We were hopeful that that might be, I guess, the silver bullet for us. But in the end, when we realised that, you know, everything was being driven away from coal-fired power, we stood up in front of our members and said, well look, we're not going to stand here and bullshit to you and tell you that we're going to agitate for a power station and take the populist approach. because that would have been okay for at the time. You might have got elected at the next election. But what we did is stood up in front of our members and said, look, we've got a real problem confronting us, so we need to, I guess, take the challenge head on, and we need to start to agitate for protection of our members so that they can transition into other jobs into the future. Does the mining and energy like talking about some of this stuff? Well, the answer is no. But reality would suggest that that's where the world's heading, that's where Australia's heading. So we took an approach that we spoke to our members, and I can tell you, when I address delegates, and I'm doing a delegates meeting on Friday, and there's probably people around this room that have seen those meetings, those delegates aren't backward in coming forward. And when you're standing in front of them telling them that, oh look, you know, coal-fired power stations are in a bit of trouble, and by the way, the mines that feed them, you're in a fair bit of trouble as well, and I'm standing in front of them telling them that we've got to agitate for some sort of process for a just transition. That's not easy, but we don't take any backward step on that. We think that that was the right thing to do for our members, to protect as much employment for them as we can, but more importantly, protect the communities. Because without some form of employment for these people to transition into, it's the point that was raised a little earlier, we will have none of these towns. You know, you look at them, Merriward, Denman, Muswellbrook, Scone, Singleton, Branxton, you can start to name them. These places will all be desolate. There'll be no people here. Okay, there'll be a few farmers around. They might have some dramas in some other areas, but they'll have no infrastructure. That'll all be gone. I just don't think that people truly understand the gravity of some of the things that are being dealt with at a government level with this false hope that, oh, by the way, we can have this great nuclear power station for you in this period of time. It just doesn't stack up from my perspective. I suspect it's in excess of 15 years. I expect there'll be blowouts. It's probably more like 20 years. You line that up with the time frame of the closures of power stations and mines in this area, and I think that pretty disingenuous to the people that live in these areas.
Thank you. Can I just ask one more question, and we'll go to Matt Burnell just for a quick follow-up question. We live in a unique area here in the Hunter. It's a beautiful place, an amazing place. We have a lot of coal mines. We've been powering New South Wales and Australia for the last century, and we will for centuries to come. It just may look a little bit different, however it looks in the landscape, whichever way it ends up going right. How long for a coal mine? How long does it take for an extension to be granted on a coal mine site that's already mining currently? How long does that average period take? Because this is one thing that hasn't been spoken about really at all in this committee, is how long the approvals procedure takes just to get a coal mine that we already have in this area. We have lots of them. What the difference would be looking at possibly getting a nuclear power station.
Well, extensions to coal mines, existing coal mines today, are a problem. In fact, I've been talking to Glencore in relation to Hunter Valley. Hunter Valley put forward a proposal that extended the mine out to 2048. They've now had to revise that proposal and bring it back to a short period of time, which is about another 2 years, 2.5 years. And in fact, they've got to go back and then put forward another application to do an extension beyond that. These extensions take years. You know, you can
some of the people I've been talking with around the mining industry, it can take them anywhere from 4 to 8 years just to get an extension granted.
Yeah, that would be right.
Yeah.
They take years. It just beggars belief when you consider the mine's already operational. They've already got a lease, but they don't have approval, and we're only talking about approval to continue into land they already own. It just seems extraordinary from my perspective.
That's right, and I don't see how that's been taken into account with the opposition's policy document that they've got in here, because they got nothing about that.
Well, if the same process applies to a nuclear power plant, then again, you know, I suspect I probably won't see it in my lifetime. I'm not sure. I've got 20 years to go, so I'm not sure I'll see nuclear power.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Burnell.
I won't ask you to clarify your age, Mr. Williams. I want to go back to your opening statement. So, just correct me if I'm wrong. Did you say 9,400 members that you represent in the district here?
Correct.
Right. I assume that you would probably be one of the largest peak representative bodies in the region then for workforces. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yeah, and to back that up, in fact, we're one of the affiliates with Hunter Workers, and so Hunter Workers has 25 unions as affiliates, and they're generally based out of Newcastle, and I am aware that we are the largest affiliate with Hunter Workers.
So you're the largest affiliate. So the Coalition made the announcement back, I think it was the 19th of June this year, regarding the nuclear pathway that they've put forward in this policy document. I would have thought, as the peak employee representative body in the area, that you would have had some direct conversations with the Leader of the Opposition, the Shadow Energy Minister, regarding this plan and what potentially happens to the workforce that you represent. So you're telling me that they have not engaged with the Mining Energy Union, the Northern Mining and New South Wales Energy District, at all since their announcement?
They have not engaged.
Nearly 7 months ago since the announcement, and they have not picked up the phone and spoken to you.
No, they've not picked up a phone and spoken to us. And more importantly, we talk about Northern Mining, so we're Northern Mining, but our district covers New South Wales Energy. So we cover all the power stations within New South Wales as well, and I've spoken to nobody.
They've not picked the phone up to have a conversation to at least start off on the right footing with your membership, employees at all the coal-fired power stations, the coal mines, etc. They've just chosen not to engage and consult.
There's been no engagement with us at all, no consultation, no, nothing.
I find that mind-blowing. But anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Bennell. Unfortunately, we've run out of time today, guys. Thank you for appearing. If you've been asked to provide any additional information, including questions on notice, please forward it to the Secretariat by Friday the 10th of January 2025. Please note that responses to questions on notice will be published on the website as submissions to the inquiry. You will be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence to assist you with answering questions taken on notice today, and you'll have the opportunity to request corrections to transcription errors. Thank you, guys, for appearing. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, please, if that's okay. Cheers, thank you. I now welcome Blackrock Industries, Hunter Lakes Corporation and Wonnarua Nation Aboriginal Corporation to give evidence today. Move on time. Is Greg here, John?
I haven't seen it. It should be on the phone. All good.
For the Hansard record, would you please state your name and the capacity in which you appear before the committee? And we'll start with you, Mr Fordham.
Stephen Ronald Fordham, and I'm the Managing Director of Blackrock Industries.
Thank you.
John Colvin, I'm a consultant for Hunter Lakes Corporation.
Mr Perry?
Laurie Perry, CEO of the Wonnarua Nation Aboriginal Corporation.
Thank you. And Mr Story, are you online?
Yes, Greg Story, Director, Hunter Lakes Corporation.
Thank you. This hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. Before I invite you to make a brief opening statement and then we proceed to discussions, would you please state if you're a current or former member of a political party or a union or an investor in the renewable or nuclear industries? We'll start with you, Mr Fordham.
Yeah, Steve Fordham. I am also the Hunter Chair for the National Party, and also I was a previous union member as well.
Mr Colvin.
John Colvin, I'm a consultant for Hunter Lakes Corporation. I'm not a member of any political party.
Thank you. Mr Story.
Greg Story, Director, Hunter Lakes Corporation. I've been involved in the renewable energy industry for 20 years, and I have invested in renewable energy projects in Australia and Europe.
Thank you. And Uncle Perry.
No, I'm not affiliated of any party.
Thank you. I now invite you to all make a brief opening statement before we proceed to questions, and we'll start with you, Mr Fordham.
Sure. So look, I'm Steve Fordham. I'm a fourth generation coal miner, and I've been in the Hunter Valley since my parents moved from the Coolest mine when it closed down, probably when I was about 4 years old. Look, I love this community, and to be honest, over the years, it's getting tough. It really is. My mum, she's been running a food and toy pill, and we used to support over probably 60 people. We're now supporting this year over 2,000 people in our local community. Cost of living's going on the rise over and over again, but to be honest, at the moment, with the federal state government, it's a war on our jobs. Look, we're a strong mining community that has been the backbone for this nation for so long. We can contribute so much money into the coffers that you guys waste day in, day out and say that we've got a problem. I'll give you a good example. We've got a hospital now in Muswellbrook we can't even have kids in. We had that right taken away from us. $4.5 billion in royalties last year. We can't have kids in our hospital. That Muswellbrook bypass was approved before I was born. We constantly keep having this barrage of we've got the change for the climate, and I understand that is a big thing, but you guys got to understand, you say it's a war on climate, it's a war on our jobs. Day in, day out, it's getting tougher and tougher and tougher. And how we try to support people to stay in this community when there's nothing getting left behind, we're constantly getting pulled apart. And finally, we get an opportunity. And look, to be honest, it might not be the best opportunity in the world, but it is an opportunity that the coalition have put in front of us to actually give us something. And I know we have people in the room saying this is a long-term plan, but it's in my time. It's in my era when this is going to happen. It's going to be the opportunities in that construction phase to support. This town, even though the amount of coal mines in it, there's only 33 companies employ over 30 people. So it's built, this industry is built on small business and the opportunities which it progresses. I went online last night and I found the current state government's Future Jobs and Investment Authority. Currently at the moment, we look at it and say, look, there's near 12,000 people employed in our mining sector in the Hunter Valley, but there's over 60,000 indirect jobs. And those indirect contractors will have opportunities that can progress from this opportunity that we have ahead of us. And we look at the renewable space and we're arguing about the power going, well, it's too late. Well, to be honest, it's too late because the government has not had the balls to do anything to progress us forward and look at the opportunities to help transition. And I hope we flood the market. I know we talk about solar, renewable, hydrogen, nuclear. It's that diverse energy grid that we need. We need a multi-complex to flood the market, to bring the power cost down, because currently at the moment we talk about we want our country to start looking at being a major manufacturer. Two ways to do that: cut cost in wages or cut cost in energy. And at the moment, we're not cutting the wages. We're going to have to cut the cost in energy, and that's what we need. We need decision making. And as much as we turn around and look at the puppet show for this to come here today, and for us, it's great to have a local and us to have a voice, but we need more than this. We need the opportunities that are going to progress, because we are literally running out of time. We've got Mount Arthur closing before we know it. We've got other coal mines in our sector that is finishing up. And the reason why they are closing down is because of you. Because of the federal and the state government making it harder for regional people in our area to create jobs and investment within our region. We need to start thinking about it. And if we look at the gap in between when the nuclear power station will be built, the best thing the government could do right now is go through the bureaucratic bullshit that we've got sitting in our system and cut the red tape to allow our mining industry to continue to do what we have done for so long in this region. We need investment. We need an opportunity. I don't know how hard it is to sit there and we turn around and say that, like our forest industry, we want to stop cutting trees in a nation where we regulate and we have industry and we have rules and regulations. Instead, we're going to stop doing it and moving over to another country where there's no rules, no regulations. Orangutans are getting cut out of the forest, trees are getting cut down, and that's what this is. We need to create new investment, we need to create new opportunities, and we have been the powerhouse for so long. But we need to start doing more. We need to start looking at that investment. And I ask the panellists that are in front of us today, take your shirts off for which party you represent and put forward what's best for the area and put what's best for regional New South Wales, because we are getting left behind. We are not getting our fair share. We don't get it. We had a royalty scheme the other day. We had our Courtney Hughes that said in front of us that we turn around and increase the mining royalties by 30%. Well, guess how much we got out? Nothing. They took our resources for regions and they're taking away the funds that could be put towards. If we want to create a real transition plan, I'll give it to you straight. Take 10% of that mining royalties that are coming out each year, put back into our area, put that investment. Start putting nuclear power stations, start looking at solar, wind and hydrogen, and boost every opportunity that we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Fordham. Mr Colvin.
Thank you very much. I understand some of the points made by Mr Fordham. Hunter Lakes Corporation has an idea, which is based on what's happened in Germany in Lusatia. In Germany, they have turned the coal mines into interconnecting lakes, and those lakes are now got wind on the shores. It has pumped hydro possibilities, and also they're experimenting with solar in terms of floating solar. We think this is probably the best possibility for disused mines, but there's a transition period, obviously, which is probably too long for some of the short-term problems. So that provides, that scheme, if adopted here, would provide water storage greater than Warragamba Dam. It would be an advancement in environmental rehabilitation. Renewable energy and pumped hydro and floating solar, as I've said, are possibilities. The use of this sort of proven state of technology from the Germans should be looked at in detail. And just on that point, we have applied to the federal government, to the water authority, the National Grid I think it's called, for funds to look at the various problems and also some of the solutions and scientific issues there. We haven't heard back from that, and we understand it also needs the state government to also approve something like this. The other aspects of this area is we think that the environmental aspects are positive and very useful. I, with one of the directors, went to Lusatia in September to have a look. If we had the possibility of putting some photographs up, I had asked for that, whether that was possible. I have? Oh, good. So you've seen those photographs. You can see what a difference that makes to a land. If that was introduced into the Hunter Valley, we would have lakes instead of empty coal mines. Then the transition to jobs in that area would follow in terms of tourism, in terms of irrigation, agriculture, and just about every industry requires that. In relation to atomic energy or nuclear energy, this would be either possibility of having additional energy, or alternatively, we all know that nuclear requires huge amounts of water, and water is the fundamental thing, going forward that this Hunter Valley needs. And speaking as a vigneron in Colburn, and that's why I'm here, every time we have a drought and there's a bushfire, the last thing that happened to me was I stood there watching a helicopter come and take all our water out of our dam, which I was happy with, but then there was nothing left, basically because there's no water. Now, we're going to have another drought. We don't have any plans for future-proofing some of this, or at least trying to, and these, if you like, Hunter Valley lakes are converting it. It's not a new thing. In Australia, in New South Wales, this is not a new thing. There's one thing at the moment called, I think they call it Pondi. Have you anyone heard of Pondi? Well, Pondi is a disused mine out near in Western Sydney, Penrith, and there's rowing facilities and water, and they've got a beach and everything like that. If you go to Lusatia in Germany, they've got pretty much the same sort of thing. Now, this isn't a short-term solution. The Germans are up to year 30, and those lakes have taken a long time to fill because you've got to get the groundwater coming up, etc., etc. But the scientific aspect of it is, what is the best thing to do for disused or not used mines? And the Germans take the view that scientifically the best thing to do is water, because of groundwater problems, etc. I don't want to go on too long, but I can go on for ages, as you can imagine. But my reason I'm here is this is a non-paying job, and it's been going on for 5 years. But it is so important, and it is a solution, we would say, to longer term dealing with the Hunter Valley. I agree exactly with Steve Fordham said. How much money has the Hunter Valley given the state governments and also the federal governments? And if you can't get enough funds to do a proper study on this, it seems to me to be pretty poor, and that's where we are at the moment. Now, would you like me to go on a whole lot of other areas? Would Greg like to say anything else?
We'll get Mr. Story on.
Well, the important thing is that there are empty voids in the Hunter Valley which are available now for conversion to large-scale water storage. These voids vary between 100 metres and 300 metres in depth. They provide massive amounts of water storage. A few of them combined is the same size as the Warragamba Dam. And I heard earlier about the the transition opportunities for employment, we could start work on these voids straight away. The project that we've been working on has now been going a number of years. We're deep into studies. We are ready to do empirical work on a particular void right now. It provides massive amounts of water, which is not just required by nuclear, but it's required by every type of industry, no matter what. And it can provide that gap that is required now for employment, as was discussed earlier. The coal-fired power stations are closing imminently. They can't wait 10 or 15 years for a job. This can be the interim. I attended a conference in London a month ago with Ed Miliband, who was talking a lot about the problems in the environmental problems in using the Bristol Channel for Hinckley Sea. Here we could have a dedicated, in the Hunter Valley with our scheme, you could have a dedicated void which is just used by one or two either SMRs or larger scale projects. It provides the environmental makeover that John referred to. At the moment, we're left with a landscape between Muswellbrook and Singleton, pockmarked with voids. We landscape all of that. We fill the voids. Some of them will be interconnected and provide pumped hydro. We've got floating solar as well. So it provides a holistic solution to provide environmental rejuvenation, an economy, jobs, and power. And as we all know, the transmission lines are there, the substations are there, the transformers are there. We don't require new electrical infrastructure. It's recycling what's there. It will attract industry, and that reduces transmission losses rather than pumping energy to Sydney, Newcastle, Wollongong, wherever. It provides an immediate solution which can dovetail in with nuclear, but provides a vast array of other benefits as well.
Thank you. Uncle Perry.
G'day. Yeah, so my family have been in the Hunter Valley now for 148 years, basically from one Aboriginal ancestor. So I've been involved with the mining industry for 40 years. I worked underground at Liddell Colliery for 10 years before I was unfortunately buried in the coal mine. That's why I've sort of got this walking stick with me. And I now work around the rehabilitation of the mining industry. The Aboriginal people in this area, especially the local people, I think have missed out on a lot of opportunities in the past 30 years in terms of engaging with the mining industry and the government, because the only time we do get engaged is when they want a mining lease, and then we get engaged to do the culture and heritage work. So that's a piecemeal of an introduction to the mining industry from the Aboriginal community. Unfortunately, that doesn't last long. It's only when you mentioned earlier about surveys and leases and that, we're the first people engaged. You pick up the rocks, you put them in a bag, you do a report, goes in a cupboard, and then that's it. So from our point of view, that's a bit disheartening when you have to then deal with trying to create jobs in the area as well. So there's the good and bad about mining, and we all need it, but I think we now need to look at the rehabilitation side of the industry, and like other people have mentioned here, fill in the holes and have different ideas on how we can do that. I guess from my point of view, we represent over 600 members, and we have a heavy involvement with a number of mining companies with Indigenous land use agreements across the Hunter region, and it's tough to be able to engage with them as well as from a corporation point of view and an individual point of view because of how it's structured. So legislation, in my understanding, for Aboriginal people in New South Wales doesn't work for our people, including all the acts of government, the Culture and Heritage Act, the Land Rights Act, the Native Title Act. But then even when we went through the Voice, all they did was divide our people and divide the community. So I'm here today to talk about how the issues that are facing Aboriginal people in this community across the upper and the lower Hunter region, and how we can support the process of developing a new way of doing business. But my main objective now is closing the gap. Closing the gap is so important now than ever. The Prime Minister gets up and stands up and says, you know, every 10 years we've failed. That's because they're not listening to the Aboriginal people. So Aboriginal community organisations are starting to ramp up their engagement with government, and I think now that they're listening so that we can deliver these outcomes for the communities on the ground. But we need more of a strategic approach about that and start listening to Aboriginal people that live in the area and in the communities and how we can engage with them. So as Australia works towards emissions reduction targets in the transition to net zero, we know the electricity sector has a major role to play. We also know it makes sense to access a full range of technologies, some new and emerging and some established and proven. In this context, some proponents want nuclear to be considered as an option for decarbonising the electricity sector. Despite nuclear power being a component of electricity generation for 16% of the world's countries, it does not currently represent a timely or efficient solution for meeting Australia's net zero target. And this is why. Nuclear is not economically competitive with solar PV and wind, and the total development time in Australia for large or small-scale nuclear is at least 15 years. Small modular reactors, SMRs, are potentially faster to build but are commercially immature at present. The total development lead time needed for nuclear means it cannot play a major role in electricity sector emission abatement, which is more urgent than abatement in other sectors. While nuclear generation is well established globally, it has never been deployed in Australia. Life of the investment assumes a 30-year economic life for large-scale nuclear plants, even though they can operate for a long period. It is standard practice in private financing that the capital recovery period for an asset is less than its full operational life, similar to a car or a house. For power stations, warranties expire and refurbishment costs may begin to fall around the 30-year mark. As a result, we use a 30-year lifespan in cost calculations. The current figures for small modular reactors, the main area of uncertainty with nuclear SMRs has been around capital costs. Time is running out for the energy transition. Nuclear power has an empty development pipeline in Australia, given the state and federal legal restrictions, which is not surprising. But even if nuclear power was more economically feasible, its slow construction and its additional pre-construction steps, particularly around safety and security, limit its potential to play a serious role in reducing emissions within the required timeframe. In the last 5 years, the global median construction time for nuclear has been 8.2 years. Furthermore, in the last 10 years, no country with a similar level of democracy to Australia have been able to complete construction in less than 10 years. Overall, it will take at least 15 years before the first nuclear generation could be achieved in Australia. The electricity sector is one of the largest sources of emissions, and delaying the transition will make the cost of addressing climate change higher for all Australians. The electricity sector must rapidly lead the transition to net zero, so other sectors like transport, building and manufacturing can adopt electrification and cut their emissions. The Coalition needs to think again about their nuclear plans here in Muswellbrook, Wonnarua country, at the Liddell Power Station site. In fact, they need to think again about their nuclear plans across Australia. This is our voice, so no to nuclear power in Wonnarua country.
Thank you, Uncle Perry, and we'll start off with Dr. Ryan this time.
Thank you very much, Chair. Uncle Perry, I was wondering if you could give us some insight into potential impact of nuclear facilities on First Nations people in Australia.
That was to you. Perry, yeah, to you, Uncle Perry, yeah.
Sorry, what was that again? I wasn't even thinking. Say it again.
Sorry, we heard from some First Nations representatives in Adelaide last week that they had particular concerns about getting social licence for nuclear facilities in South Australia. Would that be your feeling for New South Wales as well?
I guess so. I think they were talking mainly about nuclear waste and the impacts it's having on the community in Adelaide.
Exactly right.
Yeah, so I think that's the major issue, nuclear waste.
So would you have concerns about nuclear waste storage in New South Wales? If there was consideration of storage facilities for that?
Yeah, look, I'm only new to nuclear power. I'm trying to understand it, read about it, and listen to what other people say, especially other communities, First Nation communities across Australia. So, to my understanding, the only issue that I see they were having in Adelaide and possibly in Melbourne as well, I was at an AGL conference the other day, was about nuclear waste and what they're doing with it and how it affects the environment and the communities.
Yeah. And what would you be your feelings about how best to get people on board and to if we were to go ahead with nuclear to get people to agree with firstly I guess the waste facilities and waste storage as well, but also just to establishment of those sorts of facilities on country.
That's an interesting point. I mean, is it John Colvin? Yeah, I mean, I've read about solar, floating solar panels, and I've read about other areas around Australia where they can fill the voids for lakes and other things like that. And I think over time we need to talk about that seriously now and how do we engage in that activity. When the mining industry's finished, and obviously there's 20 years left of mining rehabilitation, so people have got to start thinking now about what they're going to do with these voids, so we can then work together and plan a future for the next generation of kids growing up in this country.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ryan. Mr. Kennedy.
Yes, Mr. Fordham, thank you for your evidence. I agreed with almost everything you had to say. I think government can do more, should do more. Just to clarify coalition policy, it is for a balanced mix. It's to get more, to decarbonise our economy and lower energy costs. So those lower energy costs drive jobs, drive better wages, drive more opportunities for families, for kids, for local families. We've got a report from the United States Department of Energy saying 77% of coal-fired workers can transfer from a coal-fired power station seamlessly to nuclear. The jobs pay 14% more. They pay 50% more than solar and wind. Workforce above for 500 minimum. From your experience, you've been here four generations, conversations with locals. Do you think there's going to be interest from locals to go from coal to nuclear?
Look, I think the big thing is, we do a lot of infrastructural projects. So we have a mix of coal and infrastructure within our business, and we move people from a mine site today. They could be working on a piece of equipment. They could be working on a construction site. We're talking about a nuclear power station. That's what everyone keeps talking about. We're not talking about the construction phase. And all the jobs are going to be mixed in between. And that's where I think the opportunities lie, because the big thing is, most coal miners will look at the redundancy if they've been in the industry and they're an old timer and they've been for a long time. They're looking at a big pay at the end of it when the mine closure happens and they retire. They're looking at the kids' jobs. And that's what I'm looking at the moment, is those long-term opportunities of way to progress. And I do agree with Uncle Laurie's point that social licence to operate is the key to success out of this as well. Like, to be a good example, as I said, if we're going to bring these jobs to the area, at the moment there's 4,000 people travelling to our community every day working and taking our jobs and our money away back to the coast. We need those infrastructural jobs here, and we need to keep people here, and we need to try and create that longevity so people want to stay here. Because, like, I'll give you a good example. If I pitched an idea to you right now and said, come to this old coal mine community that's all closed down, there's no large jobs opportunities. By the way, when we have a baby, and I had one this year, I had lucky enough just to get to Singleton Hospital. We had a girl that had a baby in a public toilet last year. What pitch is that to want to get someone to come to this area? We had a long-term opportunity of a job force, and I know we guys are talking about renewables, and I know you guys are talking about nuclear, but, geez, bring some commonality together and bring it together. We need both. We need a multi-mix. We've got solar we're talking about on pontoons, on water. Why not look at a diverse range?
And just to be clear, the coalition policy is to have a mix, is to have nuclear complementing renewables, complementing gas.
Yep.
That is our policy. Just on you talked about social licence. The coalition policy is to have, now we've announced sites, have a 2.5-year engagement process with the sites. This is a question to you also, Uncle Laurie. I'll ask it to you and Mr Fordham. A 2.5-year process to allow the community and the Indigenous community to identify whatever they think are the key issues. It wouldn't be run by political parties. It wouldn't be run by government. It would be run by a panel of independent expert organisations. Is that the type of consultation process you would expect? If not, what changes would you make, and how does that compare to what's going on currently with solar and wind?
I think having some guarantee, like the big thing in the renewable sector, and I'm supportive because I've got a lot of opportunities coming from our business at the moment, but the big thing at the moment, we're coming to the area, we're green, so we're good for the area, so we don't have to have a social licence to operate. When there's a negativity in the market, there's always a positivity that comes with it. That's within our mining sector. The big things at the moment, I think it's actually having the voice of the table. Big example, like every apprentice that touches this job should be from our local schools. We shouldn't have kids coming from other areas trying to take the wealth and the knowledge from our areas and creating those investments within our zones. We need to come to the table, but the big example is, the Transition Authority, great group of people I met the other day, but they're like the 4th group that I've met, and there's not a Hunter person on that bloody committee. They don't give a shit about us at the NRE. They put a nice little couple of notes, glossy document, put it on the Premier's desk, and then we leave it at that. We need the people from this area because they support the area, and they know if they don't, and they're going down to the pub, they're hearing that firsthand. And that's what I said, with that local representation, that's the way we get a voice to what we need to understand and what we should be getting out of it.
Uncle Laurie, anything to add to that?
Look, I think what's happening now with the strategies behind the renewable energy phase with the transmission lines from Bayswater down to Rowing Power Station. Again, that's the consultation process where First Nations people are engaged in that first discussion of clearing all that area, picking up rocks, putting them in bags, and that's it. See you later. Unless there's some sort of outcome that Energy Co are bringing to the play now, which would be good. In terms of other projects, solar going up here in the Hunter as well. There's some large solar farms happening, which is a good thing. We've got the Bowmans Creek wind farm as well going up. So the consultation process is as normal. We're only consulted when we have to pick up rocks. And that's it.
So insufficient, very insufficient.
Very insufficient.
On that case, and this is, as I said, for another infrastructural part of the process, if the government, being a government project, could mandate targets with penalties to apply. So, for instance, if you guys said that we're going to create 12 to 15% of this as Indigenous employees, and a penalty note for every employee that's on that site that's not Indigenous on meeting those targets, and the money going back into the communities. Good example, we had it with the New South Wales government. They brought a policy in and said, we need to increase more Indigenous businesses, so what we're going to do is penalise companies. Do you know where that money went? It didn't go to the government. It went to the Master Building Association, the Blind Dog Foundation. How the hell, what a process. Bureaucratic red tape at its finest. But I think anything that comes to this area, that communal consultation is going to be key. But it's not just going back to Canberra saying, hey, this is something that we think they want, but they don't know what they want. We know what we want. We know what works in this area. We know what opportunities in this area. And I'd give you one big thing at the moment. It's like our mining companies. They pay a couple of $100 million in a mining licence from you guys to mine in this country. What do you do with the money? You just put it in the coffers. You should be putting that, investing in the town to grow the community, grow the area, so we can have those jobs and those long-term investments.
And just on that, so the coalition plan is to actually almost do what you say. At that end of the consultation process, if that's deemed that looking at community interest, the national interest, this is the plan for a nuclear facility, the coalition plan would be to say, let's do a regional deal for that community, where there'd be local investment in infrastructure, local investment in services, in addition to the multi-billion-dollar asset of a nuclear power plant, which would provide hundreds, if not thousands, of indirect jobs. There would be upgraded air, road or rail projects, telecommunications, new investments in community funds and groups, improved hospitals, schools, water, sewage and transport. Can I just get your opinion on, do you think this is something the region would welcome, in addition to the plant, the investment in these enabling infrastructure, enabling services, enabling...
I think the big thing that comes out of this, it's not about going, and we had the consultation when Peter Dutton came to the area, and one of the big things is we all talked about the hospital, the schools, the roads and getting all the shit fixed up. That's shit that should be done before any of this happens.
Yep.
It's not something we want to wait till infrastructure starts. It's something we want today because that's what we are entitled to as taxpayers, citizens and in this community. The big thing is that we need to do is we need to look at some longevity and some diversification. One thing I think the government should be looking at is a regional-based university set up for nuclear studies. If it's a whole new industry come to the area, we've got hydrogen, wind, solar, battery, all forms of electricity. We should have that university in a regional set. Look at Armidale and Wagga Wagga, towns that are thriving. One big thing here about a lot of people in this community is no food. You imagine when you get 1,000 uni students here, we'll have bao bun and kebabs every night. Like, we need those opportunities that can come from that investment within this community, but we need some broad thinking. And that's the big thing out of here is we all sat at a table, and I put a poll up on our community notice board and said 3 things. And I said, who here would like a nuclear power station, who wouldn't? We had a majority of people. We had people actually creating extra feedbacks in that poll. And the big things were the government's just never going to do it. The government's never going to give us anything. The government's never... And it's always because, here, we're anti-government. Like, you look at a COVID intake in our community, one of the lowest intakes around. We don't trust government because we get screwed by government every day. We want to look at ways we can progress. We want to look at opportunities. And I think this is a great investment, but I think that consultation side is what's going to be the key to success.
Uncle Laurie... Okay, no, last one. Uncle Laurie, last question. That regional deal and consulting with, the National Aboriginal Corporation, the National... Is that something you would welcome, consultation on what that could look like and what that could do to create opportunities for Indigenous people in the area?
I've heard all this before, Simon. I mean, come on. You were in Parliament for 10 years in power. We got nothing. We got nothing from the Liberal coalition government.
And you're saying that's around the renewables projects as well? Or?
No, like I said earlier, the issue between government, which is a hard slog when it comes to both parties, is that we're trying to get something for Aboriginal people. You openly say in the last 10-year period we couldn't close the gap. So we're now having another crack at it with the Labor Party. And if a regional plan is for access to close the gap and listening to the Aboriginal community, because if we close the gap, right, we build on the Indigenous economy, but it also builds on the Australian economy as well. It's so simple, except we keep getting, people like yourself saying, "Oh, what about a regional plan? Well, what does that look like? Are you going to listen to us, or it's the same as the Labor government? What does a regional plan look like? Is that something we can achieve?" And we're talking about a 10-year period. But you're also talking about 10 or 15 years for this nuclear power plant to be operational. That's a long time. And like our mate said there earlier, there'll be a ghost town. So, damned if you do, damned if you don't in some areas, but it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up having a nuclear power station here because of the time frame.
Yeah, just to answer your question directly, I think the Energy Minister, and I've also spoken with our Indigenous Affairs Shadow Minister, who do genuinely want to engage the community, and on the time frames 2035, 2037, if that's around there, the construction jobs, we hope that it would overlap and provide those opportunities, but happy to chat offline.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr Kennedy. Just following on from a little bit about what you've been saying there, Mr Fordham, is that the distrust in government, right? The opposition were in government for 10 years. They did nothing about this. They didn't change the moratorium. They didn't do anything like that. It's only just came up since they haven't been in government. they've decided to talk about this. So do you think that 2.5-year consultation period that they're talking about, do you think the community here, the community in the Hunter, the community in the New England area will actually believe that? With the distrust that you have in government already, do you actually think that they will do the right job, considering that we've heard from other witnesses today around when the opposition were in government, both federally and state, that the consultation periods weren't there then? So what will change now? What's the light bulb moment?
I think, to be honest, and I'll say this clearly, you guys will get out of government. It'll be Liberals will blame you guys and say they were in the power last 3 years, and we hear this shit all the time in government changes. It's a cop out on both sides. To be honest, even though it's time now, it should have been time a long time ago. And I think at the end of the day, there's failings on both sides of government. But I think it's the clear aspirations of where we are right now. Give you a good example. 3 years from now, we're going to lose in this valley around 20,000 jobs. So where do we talk to those families and say that we're here to represent those people? And where's the thing? Because at the end of the day, this happened in Sydney. If we're talking about a big loss in Sydney, all of you guys right now will be bailing out. You guys will be turning around going like you did with Holden, you did with all these industries. You go, we're going to throw money at you, we're going to try and keep you in the area. Once the money's gone, it's gone. We need to start talking about it now. And I know we can talk about past failings, and to be honest, this should have been a long time ago. And I started with Reynolds said it earlier. We should have had Healy coal-fired power stations getting built. The one thing that I do like, the fact that this is going to be done under a federal government and the states are a bit anti it at the moment, is hopefully the fact that we can't sell it. Hopefully it stays in government hands. Stupidity that we keep selling our assets over and over again. And don't get me wrong, I think it's under both governments that's happened. I don't know who sold exactly was in power at the time of the coal. But we need to start owning our shit again, and we need to start owning the power prices, because it is getting too expensive. Like, I've got that many workers working for me, like they're just breaking in each week. And then the worst thing is, and at the same time, the government brings in all these initiatives and say that we're not paying as employees, we're not paying our employees rights because you guys are raising the cost of living. And then saying that we're the bad guys out of this. Like, be honest, that COVID-19, the amount of money we wasted, we could have fixed this energy crisis with the money. We put big things in when big things happen, but we need big things today. We need big moves, and we need to start thinking forward. Like, on our coat of arms is the kangaroo and the emu, two animals that don't walk backwards. So let's stop looking backwards and start looking forwards.
So with looking forward then, we've heard from experts in the field saying you were just talking about your workers are struggling, and you do amazing stuff with your workers, and I applaud you for what you do, because you do great stuff, and I see all of you regularly. So, but we've heard from the experts, power prices are going to go up, anywhere up to $1,200 on average per family, with nuclear energy in the mix. That is, nobody wants that. I know your workers don't want it. I know people at the Hunter don't want it. Nobody wants that. So how is that an acceptable thing underneath bringing this into the mix with the power prices going up?
I think, to be honest, and look, this is the way it is at the moment. All these solar farms and wind farms and hydro dams and all that, they're privately owned. They're going to go up no matter what anyway, because at the end of the day, that's what businesses do. We have a year-on-year increase. We keep raising the cost of power because at the end of the day, we make more money for our shareholders and our investors. I think at the end of the day, I think we have to look at diversification, because at the moment, the biggest, most expensive time for that power grid is at night. And we all know our coal-fired power stations did it for a long time. We've been holding the power grid up right now. We can't turn them off because we're going to be screwed if we do. And we've got a long term. I think we need to start looking at what opportunities at the moment. And at the moment, we keep talking about, and this is a good example today, we keep talking about the coal, all these jobs in the coal-fired power stations getting destroyed. Well, it's the coal miners is the most likely to get affected by this. Yes, you're losing 300 jobs on that, but we're about to lose BHP. And I'll give you one other one. When Drayton Coal Mine got knocked back because of the horse studs, we had business owners that tried to take their lives. We had homeowners, people literally handing their keys back in the bank. They were screwed. That's going to happen again. And I guarantee we won't have one of these committee meetings here talking about that. We're talking about it today because it's a new policy side and both sides want to wave around and say it's the biggest. But we've got a big problem coming up, and it's jobs. Like, at the end of the day, my guys can't afford rising energy costs, but they can't afford anything if they don't have a job.
Would you like to follow on from that?
Yes, I certainly would. What we've been speaking about is long-term planning. The Hunter Lake scheme is long-term planning, but you can also do transition from coal mining now to starting to prepare the mines themselves, making sure that you can do that, and that can be used for more jobs in the short term. In the end, we have to say what is going to benefit our grandchildren in this valley. The thing that's going to actually help them is a plan which says we turned this problem into a great asset for the Hunter Valley, and because we have a multiple lakes and hydro, etc., we have jobs, and we also have somewhere where people want to come and work. And at no stage have I heard any discussion about the long-term planning. And there is one thing before this group of politicians. There is one thing on the table which talks about long-term planning, which the Germans worked out 30 years ago, and they say they've still got another 20 years to go to make it good. But if you've seen these photographs, that's what an old coal mine looks like. And ironically, the planning on this is a good example. Here is a port. It was developed during no water, so it was built in the dirt, basically.
Just to pull you up on that one point. We talk about Germany as a good example. They put all their coal-fired power stations in care and maintenance, and they turned them back on because they don't have the energy mix. They've got issues going for everything. And then once again, the first thing our nation's doing, we've got a coal-fired power station there today. We're blowing it up tomorrow.
Can I just finish this short interlude? So you're right. They've got coal-fired power stations still going on some of these sites, but they've done if you like, the transition to what they're doing now. The other thing is you have to have a hydrology survey of this area, because otherwise you'll get subsidence and also other problems. So if you don't have a proper, for the whole valley, there's a big problem. That's the 30 years, if you look at what the Germans say, that's nearly number one in terms of doing anything. And the next thing is just the longevity issue for this Hunter Valley and moving it away from what I'm hearing a bit as the next election. Thanks.
Reynolds, do you have something quickly?
Thanks, Chair. Just a real quick one, and this is about timeline. And I hear what you're saying, Mr. Fordham, and I agree with a lot of what you've said today. But we heard very early on in the inquiry, we heard from Claire Savage, who sits with the Australian Energy Regulator, and one of the biggest issues is going to be getting legislation through. Whether we like it or not, the fact of the matter is legislation takes a long time to develop and get right and put into place. And she's said that we could be looking between 8 and 10 years just to get the regulatory frameworks set to even consider construction. Now, if we talk about next year, LNP does successfully get in, we're talking 2033 to 2035 before the framework's being landed to allow construction. So I'm just like, I hear what you're saying around workforce needing to be developed tomorrow, like jobs coming online tomorrow, but like the nuclear timeline, the numbers just don't add up to me, and I'm just. Is there something I'm missing?
From someone as a third party sitting on the line and you in a political seat, let's be clear. We turned around during COVID-19. We changed every policy and every procedure to suit. We can do it. That bureaucratic bullshit red tape is under all government at the moment, and you know it yourself. It's pulling shit up.
I'm just saying a realist.
100%. But I think this is where you, as you've just alerted there is a problem within your planning and your assessment and your government, and that's the thing that we need to be sitting there and trying to change so we can fast-track projects. We do need to look at stuff, and we need to do it safely, and I do 100% agree, but we need to start looking at ways we can do stuff quicker, because we have got a national crisis on our hand. It is literally getting to the point that we are running out of power. We're going to have blackouts. And you know what the first thing is? It's not going to happen in the Sydney area. It's going to happen in our regional areas first. It's going to screw us first. We need to start looking at ways we can push for this stuff to fast-track, and it is, if it's your government bureaucratic red tape, start cutting it. Same thing with our coal process, and Dan, you could back me up 110% on this. We have got a big problem at the moment proving coal mines. We need to continue to mine coal for a very long time. A lot of these infrastructure projects and money that we just make it rain every day is coming from us. We'd love some of it actually come back here, but we need to start looking at how we can cut the red tape, and that's where it is. And one thing on and with Uncle Laurie, the biggest thing is here, we talk about the diversity within the valley. The second largest employer of Aboriginal people in Australia is the mining sector. And we're going to lose these jobs and opportunities. We look at Muswellbrook at the moment. I think we're in here 35 to 40% female employed. We're a male-dominated industry that's leading the way in female opportunities. All these women are about to lose jobs too. So we've got to start looking at it. I know you talk around and say it's the red tape. What I'd love to see is the Labor government come with a commitment to the Hunter of what you guys are going to do to create the jobs. And it doesn't have to be energy. Does not have to be solar, wind or anything. We don't have to keep saying energy. You guys have got government contracts with defence. We could be bringing those industries here. You could be looking at state government turning around and doing payroll tax-free thresholds to encourage companies to come here. Start making some big moves.
We do have some plans, and AGL has some plans actually for Liddell Power Site for thousands of jobs, and thousands of jobs that the people in this area, that workers that you have, will go and do as well. So there is a plan there as well from some of these companies that are doing this. And if a nuclear power station does come here, those thousands of jobs get ripped away straight away.
I agree, but look, you look at it from a 4.5 acres of the land that this thing's supposed to take up. There are other moves in other areas that we can move to. We've got the Bayswater 2 site, and I've been prominent from day one. As soon as the government said Liddell, I said we should look at other opportunities, and we should. But I'll give you a good example around this area at the moment. BHP, 35,000 hectares locked up at the moment because government's put rules in there about buffer zones that we can't touch. We've got all this acreage around us, all this farmland, it's all locked up. Mining companies don't want it. They want to give it back to the people and allow us to start creating industry here. But we are so bound by this red tape, and we don't even live in Canberra.
You know as well as I do that exactly right with the buffer zones. That is a legislative thing from the state governments.
100%.
You need to get them on board to change this and to be able to do different things at those sites. But as you and I both know as well, whilst people want to buy our coal, we will always sell them our coal.
100%.
Whilst there's a market there, and we discuss this regularly, but BHP are choosing to close down their site.
But I do throw one thing at you, and I call it now the government mentality, and we did it during COVID-19. You do not have to get vaxxed. But if you don't get vaxxed, you can't do shit. This is the problem at the moment. So you can continue to mine coal, but we're going to make it so hard for you to do it. We're going to make it so regulated, so much handcuffs on you that you can't do it to the point that you go, it's just unfeasible in Australia. And then we say, well, they want to leave the market. And I do understand, I support BHP's decision to leave, but we need to start looking at what happens, what is the transition. For a good example, 35,000 hectares, the government should be looking at what we could do to invest that land to creating more future job opportunities within this area.
And that's a state government thing.
100%.
This is not a federal government thing. This is a federal government inquiry, and we get drawn into state things a lot that are out of our control, because we found out from COVID especially just how much power the states have compared to what the federal government has. So we need to make sure we're comparing apples for apples, not apples for oranges here.
Oh, look,
as well.
100%.
Yeah.
Question there, Chair.
It doesn't matter if there's a question or not, Mr Kennedy. It was a statement to a fellow who I deal with regularly.
Free for it.
Yes.
We're all
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Excellent, guys. Well, thank you for your time today. We've run out of time. If you've been asked to provide any additional information, including questions on notice, please forward it to the Secretariat by Friday the 10th of January 2025. Please note that responses to questions on notice will be published on the website as submissions to the inquiry. You will be sent a copy of your transcript of your evidence to assist you with answering questions taken on notice today, and you'll have the opportunity to request corrections to transcription errors. Thank you to everyone that came today. The audience, you were great. Thank you. Thank you to Barnaby and his wife for coming as well. Great to see you guys here in the Hunter for now, which will soon be New England. Thank you to the venue for all the work they've put in to do this. Thank you to the witnesses. Thank you to broadcasting. Thank you to Hansard for what they're about to do. Thank you to the wonderful secretariats, and thank you to the committee members. Cheers.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.